Wes Buck Show.
It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. This is the biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred.
Speaking his mind.
I've never had a problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way.
Exploring hot topics.
Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do.
And spreading the gospel of drag racing.
I respect the history. I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. This is the great American motorsport, drag racing.
The Wes Buck Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine, checking in. It is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. Hope you are doing well on this wonderful Wednesday afternoon. It's great to be back. Huge shout out, first and foremost, to all of you that took part in the inaugural Drag Illustrated Awards last Wednesday night. We went without our regularly scheduled programming and brought to you the first ever Drag Illustrated Awards. Huge crowd on hand. Tons of views after the fact. And I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for being part of what we truly believe was a historic moment in the sport of drag racing. Very, very exciting deal. And again, we hated to miss you last Wednesday afternoon, but we surely feel like it was worth it. I want to remind each and every one of you, no matter where you're tuning in from, please let us know in the comments. Throw a message in there. Let us know where you're watching from, maybe where you went racing this past weekend or where you're headed this coming weekend. And also click like, click share, click subscribe if you're following along on YouTube. It makes a huge difference in our mission to spread the gospel, spread the good word of drag racing. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to bring on my co-host here and dive into the conversation. We've got a ton of stuff to cover. Oh my goodness. A couple of months ago, we were kind of scratching the bottom of the barrel. It's the middle of the throes of winter. What are we ever going to talk about? Now, drag racing is going on all around us. Almost unbelievable. We are just days removed from the conclusion of the 2022 running of the NHRA Winter Nationals in Pomona, and just a couple days away from the 13th annual running of Lights Out, the biggest small tire drag race on the planet Earth. Mike Carpenter, JT Hudson, what's going on, fellas? You guys doing all right out there in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Kirksville, Missouri, collectively, or respectively?
Hang in there, man.
Is it cold everywhere? It's not.
It's not cold in North Carolina, man. It's like 70 degrees. Yeah, I'm a little steamy today. I need some more ventilation up here in the cave, in the DI Wizard of Oz cave.
Oh my gosh, we got people checking in from Belgium. I love the reach of this deal. That's one of my favorite things. Is we say it every Wednesday, but it's great to have all these big name guests. But the conversation and the engagement that we get going in the comments, that's really where the action is. So thank you guys all for checking in and letting us know where you're watching from. Guys, where to start? We have a laundry list of guests with us today. Top Sportsman standout, Don Meziere. What else do we have going on? We have we got Erica Enders, I believe, that's going to check in with us at some point.
Hoping to have flying. Erica. She's traveling, but at a sponsoring engagement. But hopefully we can get her at the tail end of this deal. We've got Robert Hight, and we've got John Sears to preview.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Preview some X275. It Lights Out 13, all right? 13. How many we're doing now? 13
annual running of Lights Out, man. Kind of crazy. Yeah. What do you guys? I think let's dive right in. We got a lot to cover with Pomona alone. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about Lights Out and kind of the entire radial racing space when we're joined by John Sears here in just a few minutes. But man, it felt like there were a lot of storylines coming out of this season opening national event in the greater Los Angeles, California area. Let's just start kind of at the top, if you guys would like. Actually, let's not. Let's start with Pro Stock. A lot of action there. One of our guests later in the show, Erica Enders, who took home the win. We kind of went into 2022 saying that Pro Stock had stolen the show, had stolen all the headlines for the last several seasons. Man, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like they kind of kept that momentum going to start the season. I mean, 20 cars on the property, some fresh faces, some really competitive side-by-side drag racing. We got to see Greg Anderson and Erica Enders, some arch rivals there, go head-to-head in the semifinals. Ultimately, though, an all-elite final round with Erica Enders going up against teammate Aaron Stanfield in what I thought was going to be a barn burner of a drag race, but Aaron shook the tires there, not too terribly far off the starting line, and got to watch as Erica streaked to the win, man. What was your guys' take overall on the pro stock kind of action this past weekend in Pomona? Mike, let's start with you. I mean, were there any standout happenings? I think obviously Erica winning, starting off the season in fine fashion, but there was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I think the 20 cars is a big deal. Erica mentioned that in one of her top end interviews. And I mean, it's we have to talk about Erica. We saw her at PRI with her arm looking much like yours is right now. Yeah. I know it's a different injury. You got the bicep injury, but she had elbow surgery in the off season. And I think she's ahead of schedule as far as the recovery. She was throwing those wallies around, lifting them up. And they said,
I had heard, not to cut you off, but I had heard that we may not see her until a couple races into the season.
That's what I
was looking for a big name fill-in. I was kind of thinking, man, they're going to let this fly under the radar and let it be big news when it happens.
She mentioned that her elbow hurt when she was getting in the car to drive it back, I think.
Yeah. And they said, I think a cool thing is that they worked on getting probably like a lower leverage shifter for her that was easier to shift, so it didn't wear her arm out. But to come back from that and kind of she's got the number 2 on the window this year and she's not happy about it. And she said, no more Miss Nice Erica, which I think is an interesting thing. And she seems like she's out for blood this year, which is gonna be an interesting thing to watch all year. Greg Anderson there in the semis, that was a great matchup. He got loose, wasn't happy with the track. Showed some of his fire
at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Well, let's talk about those first two things, like specifically here real quick, because I did find it interesting that considering she lost the championship by like the skin of her teeth last year, the motivation factor for Erica Enders seems to be off the charts. Like it would seem as if they like finished 15th.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what I was getting from her in those interviews, going like, hey, you guys are being your own biggest critics.
She said multiple times, I'm tired of getting my butt kicked out here and mopping the floor with me. And I'm like, Erica, you finished second, right? I mean, but to that team, second might as well be last. I mean,
and maybe that's what it is.
Ricky Bobby, first or nothing, right?
What do they say about all the greats, right? That they will find like unique ways to get motivated. I remember reading stories about like Michael Jordan, like a janitor from the opposing team's convention center would like look at him funny and he's like, I'm crushing all these fools. I'm dropping 90 on them tonight. And you're like, whoa, dude, that guy just is like a janitor. Like, no need to take offense to that. Nope. It's already done. And that's kind of what I sense out of Erica.
He wants that. Like, he wants that motivation.
He wants it. She's seeking it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So I applaud it. And if you have to go, I mean, all of us have to sometimes dig deep to find that extra bit of motivation. And I think what we're really seeing, perhaps more so than a chip on her shoulder or on that elite motorsports team shoulder collectively, is that they've accomplished so much. So they're going to have to get creative to be motivated, right? I mean, so many teams, I've had candid conversations with many a pro stock racer, and it's a huge accomplishment for these men and women to qualify in pro stock. I know a lot of people who have spent tons of money and tons of time and never qualified for an NHRA pro stock race, let alone won one or won 34 of them the way that Erica Enders has. So it's kind of interesting to me, and I think it speaks to why and how she will be remembered as one of the greats, one of, if not the best to ever do it when it comes to natural driving ability, because this young lady's reaching for motivation. She's looking for it wherever she can find it. Trolls on the internet, competitors, really close races, near misses.
And probably the arm too. I mean, coming back from that probably motivated her as well. And then we saw probably the thing that makes Greg great, that same kind of fire and motivation that he has, and how upset he was after what happened in the semis against Erica with his top end interview, which, hey, we're all for that here, man. We want to see that passion. We want to see these guys want it. And that's why we're a huge fan of Greg as well.
I feel like we saw it a little bit across the board, to be honest. I felt like we saw every time a camera was pointed in someone's general direction, I felt like we saw a little bit of a more elevated response, right? I mean, I don't get Caps called out Dodge, and I think what you see there, that's a man operating with newfound autonomy. This is a man that is, for the first time in his professional career, the buck stops with him. He doesn't have to worry about who he upsets or if the boss is going to be mad. it's his baby. And I do think we are already one race into the season seeing these independent team owners or these drivers turned team owners becoming, it's paying dividends already one race in. I even noticed it was interesting. Antron Brown, I was watching the NHRA's behind the scenes clips on YouTube, which I'm really glad that they're putting that content out. It's really well produced. It's shot clearly with like a high end camera, and it captures a lot of live mic moments and stuff like that I don't think we would see otherwise. And it was cool to see like Antron Brown was down there on the top end. He'd gone out, in previous rounds, but after the final, he was down there rocking the aviators and the AB Motorsports jacket, and he was being part of the scene. Obviously, his quasi teammate Justin Ashley ended up winning the deal, so he was down there. But I just felt like we're seeing those guys. We're seeing some of these drivers unchained a little bit, because I bet previously Antron Brown would not be down at the finish line, after, or down in the shutdown area after a race, because he's got other obligations. His previous bosses or previous sponsors have him doing things or have him scheduled to be, maybe it was just as simple as had to make his flight. Right. Who knows? But now these guys, I'm seeing them walking around the track with the autonomy to do and say whatever they think or feel. And it's an exciting thing.
You got knocked out. I mean, the last thing you want to do is go be a cheerleader for someone else. I mean, at that level of racing and competitiveness.
But this is the kind of thing we were hoping to see. We've talked about it in the off season. What are we going to see as far as behavior? What's going to be different about these guys? And we're already seeing it. I mean, it was on the chip. Intensity was high. These guys care. And this is what I hope we continue to see more of as the season goes on.
That's going to be the challenge, is if they can maintain this level of intensity, maintain this level of enthusiasm. And as we all know, and I think many of the people that watch this show and consume content on the World Wide Web and in various places, keeping up with all of this work is going to be hard for those guys. Continuing to do the live check-ins. We got to see Ron Capps go live. I don't know the last time I've seen him go live on his social media accounts, but he did Monday morning and was just walking around the pits, kind of giving people his fan base and racer, the people that follow him in our industry, really cool. They're just giving him a little behind the scenes peek. And I go, man, they've come off, they've left the starting block strong, and I hope they're all able to maintain this. Before we go full into Nitro talk, there was a lot of other storylines that existed in Pro Stock that I did some research on here before the show. First off, I hate to admit this, but I completely spaced that this was the 900th Pro Stock drag race. How cool is it that Erica Enders, someone we believe to be collectively, I think, one of the best natural drivers ever, wins the 900th Pro Stock race, gets that badass T-handle shifter, that Hurst shifter. What a really cool moment. But I wanted to touch on this specifically. We've talked in the last couple of weeks, Mike Murder, about, it seems like the competition on the starting line has ratcheted up, and I think you guys will find this interesting. I pulled up the eliminations breakdown from this past weekend for Pro Stock in Pomona, and I went ahead and pulled up, shout out to our friends Rick Green and the gang at dragracecentral.com. I pulled up the elimination notes from 2005 at the NHRA Winter Nationals, right? So I went all the way back to 2005, and I broke down the average reaction times. So the average reaction time in eliminations this past weekend for Pro Stock was an 034, which sounds pretty salty, right? I think out of all of them, I only saw one 00 light, a 004 off the top of my head. I can't remember who it was. But my point here is, check this out. We may have thought Pro Stock has gotten more intense or more competitive on the starting line, but I think we might be full of shit. Because if you go back to Pomona in 2005, the average elapse or the average reaction time way back then, when Jim Yates was driving and Jason Line was driving and Jed Coughlin Jr. was driving, was an 038. Yeah. So 16 years and all this talk about drivers getting better and there being even more of an onus on the starting line than ever before, more of a focus on the starting line than ever before. The reaction times are 4,000ths apart. I find that very interesting, right?
It is interesting. And I think that the competition has always been so high. Pro Stock has always been a levers game. To me, where the interesting part is the fuel ranks, especially top fuel, with all the youth and everything we're seeing in there. We've talked about guys like Justin Ashley coming in there and kind of changing the game as far as what's expected out of the reaction times of these drivers. And we've got I don't have the notes in front of me, or we don't have that kind of comparison, but I think if you did the same kind of comparison in Top Fuel specifically,
I started
funny car, you would see a bigger gap. I think that's where the youth and the competition, technology, whatever, these guys, I mean, like you see a Justin Ashley, you see an Austin Prock, they're just, they're in shape. You know, they take this deal seriously. This is their job. But of course, we've always had Antron. We've had guys that have raised this deal to the next level. So I think you're going to see more of that difference if you compare 2005, 2022 in those fuel ranks, which I think is interesting. And I think Top Fuel especially is just like shark infested waters this year.
It really is.
We heard a couple drivers even mention that they've been working on their times.
Yeah.
You know, like they've been practicing, and we heard it in their interviews. So it's something they're paying attention to this year for sure.
And if you look at it, man, and you really break it down, I mean, look at Erica Ender's average reaction time throughout the weekend. I didn't go back and compare hers specifically to like 2005 or many moons ago, but she was 13, 16, 12, and 50 in the final. I was a little bit surprised by that 50 light in the final. Having Aaron Stanfield in the lane, you can't give that guy an inch.
She said
her glasses were fogging up.
You saw what I saw. Yeah.
I saw that in that behind the scenes clip. And another thing that I'm glad that those videos exist for, because I found that really interesting, because I'm going, man, she staged second. You know, Aaron went in first. I was wondering what could have thrown her off, but that does make sense that she was worried about going red because she couldn't see very well. Obviously, another big storyline from this weekend, 20 cars, one of them being driven by Camry Caruso, making her Pro Stock debut. To the best of our knowledge, only the second female to ever even attempt a full pull in NHRA Pro Stock competition. And I got to say, man, I think she looked pretty damn good out there. I mean, I can't really think of there's not been a whole lot of rookie debuts that have went much better than that. I mean, obviously Dallas Glenn set the bar extremely high in 2022 for what we can expect out of a rookie driver in Pro Stock. But for Camry Caruso, that young lady, to make the big move from PDRA Pro Outlaw 632 competition into NHRA Pro Stock and end up, you know, going out in round one, bummer of a situation. And I'm sure that team's disappointed. I recognize and appreciate that they have high standards set for themselves. But I mean, she's leaving with her name as top speed of the meet. That was one of the notes I made. Top speed, Camry Caruso, 210.90.
With a new in-house engine program, Titan Racing.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. I mean,
very impressive.
A lot of, you know, you just never know what you're going to see out there. Pro Stock is just a whole different level, especially when you're talking about doing your own in-house programs, and we've talked about how KB and Elite have really made it so that you can go, you know, lease an operation or fly in with your fire suit and helmet and be competitive. And that's kind of changed the dynamic. These guys are doing it the old school way, doing it the hard way, building it from the ground up. And for them to come out, rookie driver, rookie engine program, and with that kind of performance, you gotta, what can you say? It was impressive.
That is impressive.
And I mean, I just think about, and then I go back to the Erica Ender storyline. Considering this past weekend, she scored her 34th win. I mean, I'm sure it's fresh in your guys' mind as well. July 2nd, 2012. I mean, Chicago. It's only been 10 years ago. Chicago, Route 66 Raceway, Joliet, Illinois. She scores her first ever win. I took note of the fact that Erica was behind the wheel for 7 years in NHRA Pro Stock competition before she scored her first win. And since that first win, you know, she spent the following 9 years, just shy of a decade, winning 33 more times. Really incredible how the things have changed for that young lady.
I think that's a forgotten part of her story. We see all the recent success, and everyone just thinks it's, and especially if you're a new fan or you've, you know, only recently started following this deal, that it's always been this way for Erica. But that is, to me, the coolest part of her story is that she battled for so long to get in a competitive situation and then finally had that breakthrough moment.
I mean, it's crazy to think that Camry comes in, qualifies, what was 7th? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, and then Alex Laughlin doesn't even make the field. You know, I mean, that's how competitive it is, you know, and how impressive
it really is, man. It's a super competitive category. And I also think it's, for me, I still can't help but feel like the NHRA is going to have to kind of get their arms around Pro Stock, because they've got something special there. Obviously the competition level is very high in Top Fuel and Funny Car, but I still go back to that inventory argument. Man, they got a lot of really good cars in pro stock. I think obviously we've talked with multiple Top Fuel and Funny Car competitors over the course of the last few months, over the course of this ever so short off season. But the conversation has been about, oh man, there's going to be more good cars than ever. Well, that's been the case in pro stock for the last few years, right? And I think it's going to be a little while until we see Top Fuel and Funny Car as competitive in E1 as pro stock is right now, right? I mean, because there's still some names that you're not familiar with, or some guys you're not sure how things are going to shake out with, whether or not they're going to make all 3 runs. I mean, there's some real deal journeyman racers in the Nitro ranks right now that are kind of occupying a lot of those lower qualifying spots. And man, it wouldn't be a surprise to see some wins from that number 16 spot in pro stock this year. That's my take.
Talking about going back to Top Fuel and talking about just how tough that deal is. How about Justin Ashley? This is an interesting stat right here. Since the start of the countdown last year, so that's 8 races, he's won twice and been to 4 final rounds. And now he has Mike Green as his crew chief. So he's for real. That whole operation is for real.
I was genuinely impressed with how those guys have operated the last couple of seasons. Justin Ashley, I think that he's so poised that he makes some of this look effortless.
Right.
And I think we're going to need him to like mess up his hair a little bit or something. He's so polished and he makes all this stuff look almost predetermined, not at all surprised to find himself in the winner circle following, in Top Fuel competition at the NHRA Winter Nationals. And it was a hell of a performance, man. And it really across the board in the Nitro ranks. Again, I go back to these guys being able to let it all hang out. Were there any other storylines from the Nitro ranks? You mentioned earlier, Ron Capps calling out his former sponsor, I guess, at Dodge.
Yep.
What did you guys think of that? I mean, all signs kind of point to seeing Ron in a Toyota in the coming weeks and months. Is that how you guys interpreted that?
Yeah, and I got a shout out to Toyota. Like, man, they are putting some money behind drag racing, right? The commercial was awesome. I was watching the Daytona 500, a lot of drag racing in their commercials, that they're running in there.
Yeah.
And their spots that they're running, like just their spots with their drivers, had some mentioning of drag racing as well. They're spending some money, they're paying attention, and they're helping the sport out.
Are you going to go get another Tundra?
Shit, I'm going to have to, aren't I?
Yeah, you might have
to. I mean, they look pretty cool too, right?
To be totally honest with you, I feel that. Like, I feel that pressure. I feel so much support for the sport of drag racing right now coming from Toyota. Like, how about that commercial that we saw last week? We haven't really had a chance to talk about it. A major league Hollywood level production.
Kind of a hangover spin type of deal.
With Alexis Majoria, Sean Langdon, J.R. Todd, and Antron Brown all featured in it. Like, how cool was that? And to see Toyota make that kind of investment, make that kind of push, that's what we need from our sponsors, because that's the type of give and take relationship that I think is required to make these sponsorships work and to build this sport. We need partners like Toyota that will get behind these drivers and put them on, put them in commercials, put them at major events, cross them over into other markets and other industries. It's massively important, man. And I genuinely appreciate it. And I do feel, at the bare minimum, inspired to buy Toyota. I mean, if race on Sunday, sell on Monday is still a thing, I think we're going to see a lot of people looking toward Toyota for their brand of choice based on the support they're showing the sport of drag racing right now.
Yeah, they're doing a good job with that. And they did a great job with this funny car body. I haven't seen a single negative comment about the new Supra body, which was so cool. It looks good. And I think we're going to see, like you said, at least one more high profile name go that way.
I think so too, man. It is interesting because I would love to see continuing the conversation amongst these major auto manufacturers. That is something that, if pro stock has lacked anything over the course of the last, several years, it has been those manufacturer versus manufacturer battles. And if the NHRA can bring that back to the fold, bring that kind of action back to the scene by way of Nitro Funny Car, I'm all for it, man. If we can get some juice, and some drama stirred up between Tasca and the Ford boys and the Dodge guys, and now the Toyota guys, that is good for everybody. And if we can maybe see Ford or Dodge I don't mean this in a literal sense, but kind of take offense to Toyota coming after their territory and try to protect it a little bit. I mean, it could be a very good thing for the sport of drag racing. There's no doubt in my mind.
Good for Caps too, to call them out. Like a lot of times someone wouldn't, because, well, maybe there's a chance down the road or whatever, but he clearly was not happy that they hung him out to dry after he's, invested so much with them over the years. And then he goes to make his, go out on his own, and then they're like, "Nah, we're not interested."
Well, yeah, they've got their hands full. They've got the whole Tony Stewart deal, and I think that they probably put their eggs in that basket. So it's opened an opportunity for.
He's put in a lot of work for them over the years, though.
But Caps now, but that was under the DSR umbrella. Now that Caps is doing his own deal, he's kind of got an opportunity to go out and maybe make this deal on his own. So
he was evidently surprised that they didn't go with him.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, I think we all were. Yeah, but it's
yeah.
He's I think he's going to see an opportunity there. And speaking of Caps, and we've got our guest Robert Hight coming on in a little bit. Great final round and some interesting comments, obviously, from both of them. And Robert Hight, he kind of seems like he's on a warpath. He said they're going back to their 2019 setup when they, what did he say? Dominated everybody from start to finish. So, a lot of fire in him too. And that incident with his crew member,
wow.
Trevor Huff, I believe his name.
Could have been bad.
Yeah,
right?
That could have been. We've seen that go so much worse. And like I said, you really have to have some real cojones, or I don't know a proper term to use, to stand in front of a Nitro funny car and lift that body, hold it while everybody does their stuff, put it back down. And it's honestly shocking that doesn't happen more often. And we've seen it go far worse, like with the Dickie Venables deal way back with Tony Petragon. So thank goodness that they were able to get that thing stopped
after that.
Yeah.
Like, really, I figured the race was over at that point.
Yeah, me too.
I honestly kind of thought it would be too, and I was genuinely impressed with Robert's ability and so many of these drivers with their ability to keep it together, right? I mean, we've seen it time and time again. One of these cars is leaking something on the starting line, or the crew guys are always underneath the car looking for something, and then we expect this driver to just be cool as a cucumber and go out there and like knock down the Christmas tree, right? And it's crazy when one of these guys actually deliver. But I want to mention that this is something that we thought about leading off the show with today, and I do think it's a conversation worth having. And I saw a little bit of this on Twitter, guys, and I'm curious to get your input based on that situation we saw in the starting line. And I understand that these things don't happen often, but they certainly have happened before. How far away do you guys think we are from seeing crew members outfitted in fire suits and helmets and gloves, much the way drivers are? Because I honestly think that could be on the horizon. And I know the idea, the knee-jerk reaction to that.
NASCAR, right?
Yeah. The knee-jerk reaction is, oh, no, we don't need that. But I got to be honest, and I don't know the frequency of these events could really justify it, to be totally honest, but they do happen. They do happen. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a video that kind of went quasi-viral of Erica Enders revving up her car, or it backfiring slightly out the collector, and it caught Chase Freeman, a crew guy's pant on fire. Right? Right. I mean, and so it's not
or
just
it burned his leg. I think he had shorts on, and it really got his attention. But yeah, and I mean, the only other option, at least in that scenario, and Brian McCaddy just said, and Wes, you and I talked about this over the weekend, the only other option is eliminating lifting the bodies. But we talked about how critical that is to the show. That's something they've been doing since day one. That's still such a cool part of, and really unique to funny car racing. If they were to take that away, that would be tragic. Maybe just that guy in front of the car needs to wear a helmet or some kind of protective gear. I don't know, but I know
maybe he could be like the gas man or the jack man in a NASCAR or an F1 situation, where the guy that's going to be standing out in front of that car. Man, I got to be honest. This is a conversation that I started having with people quite a while ago. I think it was about the time Dickie Venables had an incident. I think that one was at Vegas, maybe. I can't remember exactly where it was.
It was like 2000.
There was another situation.
5, 6, 7, blew his pants plumb off,
and I think about moments like that. And I also weave in the notion that I'm always looking for opportunities to increase the showmanship, to ramp up the pageantry and make it look more serious. And I don't know that it would be all bad to send them. I understand it's hot at different times, but man, I don't know that I would be totally against seeing the crew required to throw on a fire suit, and specific shoes, gloves, and a helmet with a face shield to some extent. And to be honest, I think it would be kind of cool. And I'm sure there's probably some people getting mad at me as I say this out loud, but a lot of times making these things look more complicated can help when it comes to the show. You know what I mean? Like, I loved when drivers switched from the open cockpit to the canopy, not for the safety aspect, but just because I think it looks cooler. Right. I think it's a better photo. I think it comes across on television better. I mean, we already contend with our sport not really translating very well on TV, right? We've talked about it 10,000 times that it looks like a guy or a gal's jumping behind the wheel and stabbing the gas and driving in a straight line. If we could do some things that just make the severity, the gravity of the situation a little more apparent, I don't know that it's all bad. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of these crew guys may resist it initially, but it might be something that kind of becomes a badge of honor, because we would be able to easily know who the important guys are, on the starting line, because they're the ones wearing fire suits.
Right. It's a slippery slope, man, because where do you stop after that? And you and I have talked about this a lot. You go to enough of these races, you're around it enough, you're pretty well convinced that being in the car, you might be the most protected person there. I mean, so much can go wrong between down track, people beside the track, on the starting line, obviously, which I think we're seeing more rules being created around that as well, that they're in the pits, golf carts, scooters, race cars, kids running around. There are so many ways to get hurt at a drag strip. And where do you stop with that? So it's kind of a slippery slope as to how much of that you start to mandate.
We're super fortunate that we haven't had something really, really, really bad happen with, I mean, the way these starting lines are packed, and I love it, man. I'm down there. I'm standing there too. I'm guilty of it.
But we're all aware of what we're doing, right? We're aware of what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
The first time someone that's never been to a drag strip, the first thing I tell them, I'm like, keep your eyes and ears open in the pits.
You have to, right?
Head on a swivel.
Head on a swivel. Things to do on the starting line. Turn your back when they're doing the burnout.
Don't we get complacent with all that stuff because we've been there a million times, right? And then it only takes that one time,
right.
And something go awry, and bam.
And I got to be honest, I hold my breath. I hold my breath every single time I see a crewman lift or lower that body.
Yeah,
I just know that we're so close, right? The threshold is not much.
Well, like Doug Core says here, more clearance around the injector will eliminate it. So, I mean, maybe it's as simple as that, but then, you've got aerodynamic issues, things,
that's what I was going to say, because if these teams were to find out that, putting a little bit larger lip or whatever, or increasing the space or what have you around the injector would make a difference, but they found out that it scrubbed 1/10 of a mile per hour off their trap speed, they'd be cutting that crap back out in a millisecond. Because I point to going back to Greg Anderson getting loose in that right-hand lane there in the semifinals against Erica. That car, the next car down the track, Fernando Quadra Jr., went right down Broadway and made a very respectable run. I mean, how many times, Mike, have you and I had discussions about, guys, let's just put a little bit more wing on these Pro Stock cars. Let's run that wicker bill up a little bit. But they're not going to do that.
Right.
No chance. No chance are they going to potentially sacrifice performance or a number on those scoreboards in the name of making that car more stable down track. So I don't really look for these teams to add clearance or put any sort of shield or guard around that injector for those exact reasons. They're not going to do that until they have to do it. And I wonder if it wouldn't be more effective over the long haul to have these guys in fire suits, man. The NHRA has enough trouble policing the starting line of these events. And I mean, hey, listen, I'm one of those guys. I'm as guilty as the next dude for sneaking on down to the starting line sometimes when I don't have clearance or whatever the case may be. But if you really want to make that a black and white kind of binary situation, crew members should probably be wearing some sort of fireproof jacket and fireproof pants when they're down there. And again, I know it's hot. I know it's not convenient. I know sometimes they're uncomfortable, but I feel there's an opportunity for a manufacturer in the marketplace. Maybe it's one of our own sponsors like Stroud, right? To step into this opportunity and say, hey, we're going to create some crew guy based clothing that's safer, that maybe has some flame retardant properties. Maybe we're going to make some sort of hat/helmet with a face shield on it of some sort, because let's be honest, it doesn't take the throttle getting bumped for something bad to happen down there. I mean, there's been lots of major explosions down around the starting line. I can't count how many nitrous cars I've seen the engine die and then them whirl that thing back over and blow the intake to Mars and the front end into both grandstands. And there's a lot of situations like that have happened over the years. And again, I'm sure people would, be PO'd about it initially, but man, I think the discussion, I think it's happening. I think it's going to happen, man. Yeah.
Well, we shall see. We shall see, man.
Well,
Bart Rutledge
on each side, right?
I tore my shoulder I tore my bicep on sick week. I had to have surgery a couple of days ago. I'm kind of on the mend. Thanks for noticing. I appreciate you, buddy. But what were you saying, JT, about both sides?
I mean, they could eliminate the guy being in front of the car, and you have to put the body down, two people from the side. Maybe put the things on the side instead of the front.
Maybe standardize some of those procedures. I just think it's something that we should be having conversations about, because I don't want to be. People get frustrated with this stuff because it feels like, oh, it's a knee-jerk reaction. But I'd rather be having this conversation and a few knee-jerk reactions before something really bad happens, and rather than waiting until something really bad happens to then be reactive to it. So very interesting deal. JT, we're having a couple of technical issues here on the back end. I'm going to resend you all the link for our guest to join the show. I just put it in your Slack channel there. Wes striking the old bad boy decal pose. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, man. Hey, while we've got a minute here and we're getting our first couple of guests lined up in the green room, I want to remind you guys that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show right here on the Drag Illustrated Facebook and YouTube channels is brought to you by our friends at Elite HP. EliteHP.com, the world leader in new, used racing equipment, from engines, complete turnkey cars, to parts and tools. Log on to Elite HP to check out their full lineup of offerings. They've got everything everything you could possibly need, and they've got a great group of people there that can steer you in the right direction, answer any questions you might have. And don't forget, this show is also brought to you by our buddies at Redline Oil, the world leader in synthetic oils. If it comes to lubricating your race engine, your lawnmower, or somewhere in between, check out redlineoil.com and get the hookup, and make sure that you tell them that your friends at the Wes Buck Show sent you. Guys, are you making any progress with our green room guests?
Yeah, I just sent that. We've got Don Meziere coming on first here. I just sent him the link. I think he's going to be in as soon as he receives that. So nothing like a little
pull up
technical glitch, right?
Well, I think Facebook's having problems today too. Seems like most of our comments are. I won't load for me at all on Facebook. Yeah. So
you never know.
Ice storm, right?
I want to bring up
yeah, right.
Yeah, we're getting an ice storm all over creation. Hey, I wanted to bring this up real quick. Caps and Hight. Could this be a fun duel to follow throughout 2022? Do you guys think that this is this could be one of the ones that stand the test of time? It feels like Funny Car needs a new Ron Capps versus Whit Bazemore, or John Force versus Al Hoffman. We kind of need a new one of those. We saw a smidge of one develop between Matt Hagan and John Force last season, but it didn't really seem to maintain, right? It was a moment in time that was exciting, that people got fired up about, but we seem to have very quickly forgot about it. We actually nominated that rivalry for one of our rivalries of the year, an award that ultimately went to KB Racing versus Elite Motorsports. But I'm just curious, do you guys think that Robert Hight and Ron Capps, I mean, just looking at their interviews throughout the past weekend and the content that those guys are creating, I think this could be a good one. These guys are guys that they're going to play fair. I don't think we're going to see any nastiness out of those two. A couple of real deal gentlemen, professional drivers. But I'm just curious if you guys think that this could be one that stands the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. There may be something there that we're just now seeing, because Capps has been kind of unleashed, like you said. Hight is still part of the super team, the Force super team. Maybe the rivalry there is the super team versus the newly independent guy. But I think you're going to see more of this between independent drivers that have been unleashed. So I think it's a little bit unique that we're seeing that between those two guys. I think you're going to see more of these guys that are independent and sort of signing both sides of that check. Like we said, I think you're going to see more of that out of them.
Which is exciting, right? And I mean, maybe this is the ultimate, maybe this is the lesson that we need to learn, is that having the drivers of these cars be invested, like be the team owner or be heavily invested, be a partner or whatever the case may be. I think that's a difference maker. And I think that's what we're going to see. That's going to be what draws out those raw, highly emotive responses and these big over the top interviews, is when these guys are truly invested in the outcome matters more so than where they ended up in the points, right? They tore some stuff up and it comes out of their bottom line, right?
Yeah,
they're the one cutting the check. We're going to see a whole new world when it comes to Nitro racing in 2022. And I do see we've got our first guest of the day, and we're only 2 minutes behind schedule, guys.
Yeah,
we need to give ourselves a little
Speaking
pat on the back.
of owning the team, doing it all, hey, a lot of one of the most well-known companies in this industry. I saw Joe Costello in the winner's interview with our next guest say, I bet every car out here has a product from your company on it, which is a cool statement.
Let's give it up. You nailed it, Mike. Killer introduction. Let's give it up for the one and only Don Meziere.
Hey,
Don, what's going on, man?
Man, just it's another busy work day here at the shop. I sure appreciate that very gracious introduction there, Mike.
Hey, I thought it was awesome, man. It was great to see you up there. And you gave love to your crew. You guys battled through some adversity there this weekend. You had a rear end issue, I believe, and then ended up winning Top Sportsman, a national event, which is just not an easy thing to do. Top Sportsman, Wes and I, we're Top Sportsman guys to the core. So to see you out there winning that national event's a cool deal.
It was.
Yeah, it was super fun. Those races are a challenge. You're racing across 4 days, right? You got to figure out the conditions every single day, and it's kind of a new track every time you show up there. So Pomona, they only run twice a year, so it's a clean slate when you start racing there. You gotta kind of try to figure it out, and thank God we got through it. But yeah, it was a thrash between round 2 and round 3.
I was curious, and I say this a lot, and you'll have to bear with me, Don, because I frame almost every freaking question I ask with that. But to Joe Costello's point in that Winner's Circle interview, you guys, Mzire, your product lineup, you have the footprint that your brand has in our industry is very hard to overstate and or compare to. I want to just talk about how that relates to Top Sportsman. Are you at all surprised how much of a household name this style of drag racing has become? I mean, it seems like there used to be pockets of Top Sportsman racing that was really strong, certain divisions, certain sanctions and series. But now from sea to shining sea, whether you're racing quarter mile or eighth mile, national events, divisionals, or kind of local shootouts and such, I mean, it feels like to us at Drag Illustrated that Top Sportsman may be one of the most significant and growing divisions that exist in all of drag racing right now. Do you feel that way?
I really do, and I have for quite some time. I mean, we've been racing door cars, SoCal Pro Gas way back in the 80s. Of course, I wasn't. I was a little young for that, but my brothers were running SoCal Pro Gas. And a quick door slammer racing is just garners a lot of interest. People like to see fast door slammers. For one thing, they relate to the body styles a little bit. And quick racing, guys, racers, both male and female, they're excited about fast stuff. And Top Sportsman, just the combination of blown cars and nitrous cars, and even every once in a while a turbo car, and the quick naturally aspirated cars, you get such a range of ways to be successful about it. I think that opens the door to a lot of people's imaginations. And I look at every one of these cars as a work of art. It's somebody's vision that's being brought forth, and Top Sportsman is a great venue for that.
I tend to agree. And the thing I think about, like, you go to a PDRA race, you go to an NHRA race, anywhere where Top Sportsman is contested at one of these shootouts, one of the big money shootouts that happen in the country, the quality of cars is what I'm really blown away by, right? Like the competition level is very high, but it's not necessarily surprising when you think about drag racing. I mean, we find a way, we drag racers take everything to the extreme, but the quality of cars that exist in Top Sportsman, I have to believe that chassis shops, manufacturers around the country are, praying that this deal keeps going, because these are the racers that are keeping them busy. And it's not just chassis shops. It's the guys selling toter homes. It's the guys selling, stacker trailers. This is a incredibly growing part of our sport. What do you think? Are there any issues that Top Sportsman as a class is going to face as we grow? I know there's at times in different sanctions and series, there's scuttlebutt over what the dial in, what the slowest you can dial is, and in issues such as that? Or do you feel that the class is in a pretty good spot overall?
I think overall it is pretty good. West Coast, I qualified number 2 at a 660. Well, back east that wouldn't even play. I mean, that would be just an also ran. So we see a pretty wide variety as far as East Coast to West Coast and Midwest. A range of performance values there. So I think for NHRA right now, the 610 minimum makes a lot of sense. I think one of the mistakes they made with the super classes is not adjusting over time. To me, it's just my personal opinion, and everybody's got a different one, but I think they should have considered bumping that down 500s to maybe a 10th every year. Just, it's kind of by committee to keep up with technology. I think Top Sportsman will naturally do that. You can see it in Top Dragster. More and more guys just trying to nail that 610 and be number 1 qualifier and able to do it within 300s. You don't see that with the door cars yet, but I think you will.
It feels like it's headed that direction. And that was kind of where I was going with this conversation. Quality aside, how fast these cars have gotten is really hard to wrap your head around. And you think about how fast they are and how consistent they are. What's your take on some of these new combinations we've seen pop up, specifically these pro-charged engine combinations? Primarily what we see in Top Sportsman, Top Dragster has been like the blow-through side mount setup. We're certainly seeing some of the crank-driven versions pop up, but do you feel, is there a risk of seeing that that combination being the only one that exists? Or do you think that the inherent desire to be unique that exists amongst drag racers will kind of keep us safe or keep that from happening?
Well, any different way you choose to make horsepower is going to present its own challenges. And I think the blow through stuff, it creates its own challenges. It's so difficult to manage that torque, the way it ramps up and everything. But that also creates opportunity within the industry. You see controllers, the engine control units just being faster and faster and with more functionality. I look at the small tire guys and what they're doing. They just can make tons of horsepower. It's a matter of how they put it to the ground. And they just keep getting more sophisticated in the way they do that. And it's mind blowing, honestly. That's far beyond what we're doing in Top Sportsman. Even the small tire stuff is astounding how well they can put power to the ground with that stuff. So I guess circling back to your main question, the blow through stuff is a great way to make horsepower. I sure hope the Nitro stuff stays around. I'm pretty heavily invested in that one. So but again, that's another opportunity. If you're running 2, 3, 4, 5 kits, you need good technology to hang on to that, and that provides opportunity in the industry.
Well, and that's near and dear our hearts as well, because we're, kind of at our core, we're big nitrous fans around here, and for a lot of different reasons. One of them being, I just think it adds so much to the show. I mean, you talk about a drag strip on a late one Saturday night and a couple of door cars on the starting line with big hood scoops and nitrous purges and header flames. I mean, that sounds a lot like heaven to me. So I am terrified at the notion of there ever being a day that we don't see a whole lot of nitrous cars. But as I have seen this Pro Charger combination specifically get dialed in, increasingly consistent, increasingly reliable, which I think has been one of the the things that they've been trying to shore up as they encroach upon that mark, being consistent, reliable, and fast. I do get a little bit worried because I'm like, man, I want my nitrous guys. It's so important to keep them out here. But I do think, kind of to your point, there are so many people that are so heavily invested in their nitrous program or whatever it is, their naturally aspirated program, that hopefully they'll stay committed to it. Looking at the whole industry right now, Don, I'm just curious, forgive me for not knowing, but what's your kind of plan for 2022 when it comes to your own racing program? I mean, obviously starting off the season with a win probably has you wound up and ready to go to the next one. But what was your overall take prior to this weekend? Were you set on following all the NHRA national stuff that you can, or where all do you plan to race?
I tend to stay fairly close to home. When we do go racing, I like to make sure they know we were there. And thankfully at Pomona, they knew we were there, right? So so that worked out well. We're going to go to Phoenix. I was kind of on the fence about that, but went ahead and signed up on Sunday night after Pomona. So we're going to go to Phoenix and see how it goes. But honestly, drag racing's good as long as it's healthy for your life and everything. And I've always been a guy that says, this has got to be a balance between what works for my life, for my partners here at work. My brothers are so gracious about letting me take off and, holding the fort down and everything. Dave and Mike are fantastic about that. But racing out of Southern California is kind of tough too. We just lost Fontana. Right. As a track. So our closest quarter-mile track is 250 miles away at Bakersfield, other than Pomona. They run that twice a year. Right. So it's something that I just kind of have to pick and choose. I don't get excited about driving 24 hours to get to an NHRA race. I love NHRA. They do a good job, but I'm just in the wrong part of the country for it. So we're going to take a look at everyone, see if it's good for our soul and good for our mind, and kind of make the call from there.
I think those are important metrics that maybe people don't pay close enough attention to. And the reason I brought it up, I was just curious if you felt like there was opportunity in the drag racing community right now for some one-off big independent races. We've seen the last several years these one-off events. Where you mentioned Radial tire racing earlier. Most all of those big one-off independent events were started at Lights Out, the event that Donald Long put on 13 years ago. It became kind of caught fire, and now they started popping up everywhere. Our own races, I think of the World Series of Pro Mod out in Denver for 3 years, the World Door Slammer Nationals down in Orlando for a couple of years, Mel Roth's events, the Streetcar Super Nationals in Vegas, and also in Dallas. Now there's an offshoot of that event. These big independent events, do you think there's room in the sport right now for a big payout top sportsman race or a couple of those? Do you think that that's kind of the next thing? Because I feel like it's only a matter of moments before I'm going to see a flyer that says 25 or 50,000 to win top sportsman, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, I would love to see that personally. I wasn't quite able to make the Denver races you put together, but the flyer sure was enough to make me think seriously about making that trip. That's about a 20 or 22 hour tow for us to get to Denver. But the prospect of getting 40 or 60 top sportsman cars together and battling it out, man, that just sounds like a good time to me. So I would love.
I really think it's only a matter of time, Don. Like, I've been watching this and I've been waiting because it just felt like, man, there's a lot of momentum here. There's a lot of high-end cars, a lot of people that are willing to travel. Maybe not every weekend, but if it made sense once, twice a year to come have a King of the Hill type top sportsman race, man, I feel like we're moments away from seeing that unfold, and I'm looking forward to it. Maybe that's something we're going to have to put our Drag Illustrated promoter caps back on and do it ourselves. But that is such a PDRA specifically. I mean, they've got so many top sportsman cars out there. They basically have them broken down into an A and B category. It really is impressive. So many of those cars, without a whole lot of massaging, could probably compete in Pro Mod at various levels. So I don't know. It's an exciting thing, man. And I'm genuinely thankful for all the action and movement that we see in top sportsman. Because again, not to repeat myself, but I think it may be one of the most significant growth sectors that our sport has right
Yeah, PDRA has done a fantastic job with their program. We've been involved as a contingency sponsor for, I think, 3 years now. And man, I just can't believe how many cars they get there and how quick they are. Like you said, I mean, they're just amazingly fast. That they probably could run in one of the pro classes, several of the elite top sportsman cars. Circling back to the prospect of a big money top sportsman race, I think one of these promoters that does the big money bracket races might take a chance on something like that, might piggyback it on top of one of their big money bracket races. You could see, maybe a bracket flyer that says, hey, we got a special quick 16 or quick 24 top sportsman deal, and run 3 or 4 of them across the 3 or 4 day event. Racers, in my experience, they want more than one shot at taking home the trophy. And if you did a centrally located event that could draw not only top sportsman racers, but a lot of those guys have a bracket car too, I think that could be a great way to initiate a quick top sportsman big money race.
You make a great point, and it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, is that whenever this whole big money bracket racing thing that has kind of taken hold of our industry, I mean, it was, oh, they're going to race for 20 grand, and oh, they're going to race for 50 grand. And the next thing I know, it's 100, 250, 500, $1 million. It escalated rather rapidly. But as I've watched that, a lot of people have pointed to the money being kind of the difference maker, or what gets people excited or draws out all those cards. But I think you are onto something, Don. The point, there's a lot of chances to race at those events. There may be a 100 grander on Saturday night, but there's a race on Wednesday, a race on Thursday, a race on Friday. And by golly, you're getting your money's worth when you show up at one of those events. And I'm surprised there hasn't been some things like that pop up in heads up drag racing and in top sportsman, because I think a guy like yourself, not to put words in your mouth, I mean, if you could roll up to an event that was 3 or 4 days long and run 2 or 3 races during the course of that event, I don't think that's anything you'd be upset about.
We actually brought the top sportsman car to the Spring Fling. I think it was 2018 or something like that, and did well with it. Went to the semi, actually runner up at one of the 30 granders there. And it was just a lot of fun. That was a good enough finish to make me enter the million with the car. Of course, ran up against this guy called Luke Bogacki. I don't know if you heard of him or not, but yeah, he pretty much cleaned my clock first round. But anyways, it was a heck of a lot of fun. It's great bracket racing. And the door slammer format is just a winner, I think.
I agree. Tell me about your car specifically, because whenever I was going through your round results, I'm going, okay, qualifies number 2 with a 669 at 205 and change, almost 206, and then proceeds to bust off a bunch of low 670s, 677 in the final. What motor's in your car? Forgive me for not knowing.
No, that's fine. It's 600 cubic inch Chevy big block. And that's the same combination we've run for about 7 years now. For the first 5.5 years, I ran it with just one kit, kind of in the 690, high 680 zone. Last July, we tested with the second kit and proved it all out. The guys at Big Stuff helped me out with the engine control, and they met me at the dyno, and it tested perfectly. So we went to Pomona.
2 foggers? 2 foggers, or two, I guess, dry fogger systems, because you got EFI on it?
Yeah, they're dry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's EFI car. Yeah, so the first kit's a 36 jet, the second kit's a 28. And it liked it. The car, the balance of the car is really well suited to that 690, 670 zone. And so it didn't change the launch all that much. We ramped in the second kit pretty early, and it just got faster. And I like that because you kind of control the race a little bit better with some mile per hour. That's actually what saved me second round, was having a little bit of mile per hour on my opponent.
Well, kind of closing notes here, Don, and I want to thank you again. You have been a longtime supporter of what we do at Drag Illustrated. Honestly, I think you may be in that elusive elite category of guys that have been in darn near every issue we've ever printed. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and belief in what we're doing. And I don't want to put you on the hot seat after I butter you up like that. But you race a pro stock style car. Did you have any issues or concerns with the track in Pomona this weekend? There was some scuttlebutt that the thing was a little loose on down toward the quarter mile. Did you have any issues this past weekend?
I didn't, but I know some of my competitors did have some challenges. To me, it just comes down to trying to have a setup that's really forgiving, and we've been concentrating on that for a long time. I have a good friend of mine at Chassis Engineering that helps me with chassis tune. He's down in Florida, but man, I just text him my data and he says, oh yeah, do this, do that. And I just trust him. And he's made the chassis setup really forgiving. It really is not.
Are you talking about Clayton?
Yeah, Clay. Yeah. Clayton Murphy.
One of the greatest human beings alive, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. Good guy and a great company, just a wealth of knowledge. He's been fantastic to me, so can't thank him enough for that. But he's really helped me to make the right changes to make the car less track dependent. And we got plenty of wing in the car, so the top end's never really an issue. The car sets down really good and races well at 200. So as long as we can get the starting line figured out, and it's usually just a small shock change or a little bit of a weight change, a little balance,
right,
and it's good to go. So we didn't change a thing from the World Finals setup. The car was just good all weekend. So
wow, well, it's good to hear. You never know
the right people on the team,
Yeah, no, you clearly do. You mentioned another great guy, longtime supporter of ours, Clayton at Chassis Engineering, great human being, great company. And Don, again, thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on a heck of a way to start your season. I hope we get to do a whole lot more of this. So keep that hot rod in the winner's circle, and we'll keep burning up your phone lines.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. Been fun.
No problem, brother. Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk soon. I think that there is a lot of conversations that we could have on this show and in the future. Top Sportsman, again, I hope you guys know that I don't mean to ramble about this stuff, but I can't really say it enough. And I think, Mike, you'll back me up on this. Top Sportsman and fast door slammer racing is such an important part of our community. The cars that are built for pro mod so many times end up in Top Sportsman, or they end up in Comp Eliminator, or they end up at a Quick 8 shootout on the East Coast or down here in Texas. This is a brand of racing that is very, very, very important to our industry, and it's cool to have the opportunity to highlight somebody like Don after a whale of a weekend out of the Winter Nationals. Man.
Great guy, great company. And very cool. It's a guy that you hear of his company, but you may not know about his racing exploits or know him personally. So it's cool to have him on. And when he gets a big win like that, to talk a little bit more about it. And Nitrous guy at heart. Nitrous Top Sportsman Racing, man. That's where it all started right there, buddy.
That's how you get into heaven, right?
Yeah,
it is. Car with nitrous. It's like surefire entry. I think
that's what I'm banking on. That's what I'm banking on.
Me and you both, man. Well, hey, guys, we still have a lot of ground to cover here on today's episode of the Wes Buck Show. I want to tell you guys, again, thank you so much for being a part of this show, this program, each and every Wednesday. If you're following along on YouTube, please click subscribe, tap that little bell icon right beside it to make sure that you get notified each and every time we pump out some new content. If you're following along on social media, click like, click share, help us spread the gospel of drag racing. We truly believe that it's these Wednesday conversations. Drag racing doesn't need a whole lot of help Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because we've got the cars and the stars of our sport out on the track doing the work for us. It's Monday through Thursday, in our opinions, that things kind of get quiet, and we need to keep conversation going. That's what the other sports have that we don't, is ongoing conversation, ongoing discussion. And we just appreciate you guys being a part of it each and every week. It's a ton of fun. And I guess, do we have another guest already lined up in the green room?
We do, man.
We do. And this is a guy that keeps the conversation going all the time.
Oh my goodness. I know who you're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, the man behind 275 series Radial tire racing, X275, the founder himself, technical director for the PDRA, and an all-round wonderful human being, John Sears. What's going on, John?
Oh man, we are living the dream, buddy. We retired last April, and all I do is get to go to the racetrack now. 33 times last year.
Wow.
No joke. Is that the count? 33 races you attended last year?
Yeah.
My goodness. Yep. And it doesn't look like 2022 is going to be much less. Am I right?
I was going to say we're going to add to that.
No, it's only February, and I've already got 28 or 29 on the schedule for this year. I'm sure a few more will come up.
Only 28 or 29. Yeah. Well, it's no secret that I'm sure you're either on site or on your way to the house that Donald Long built, South Georgia Motorsports Park in Valdosta, Georgia, for the 13th annual running of Lights Out. Can you point to some of the things that you're most excited about headed into this weekend? I mean, we never lack for things to talk about when it comes to small tire racing. But what are some of the things that you're most specifically excited about when it comes to this 13th running of Lights Out?
Well, I think what we've seen with Donald Long's new series that he's developed along with our series, the RTRA, or Radial Tire Racing Association, we've given racers multiple opportunities throughout the year to come compete for large cash prizes, end-of-year points funds, and the whole gamut of what true championship racing is all about. So Radial Tires is really starting to come into its own with these two series, and we try to work with everybody that we can to make sure that these racers have opportunities to race in multiple venues.
How important it feels to me like I would have loved to have seen the points series come a little sooner. Maybe, as we say all the time, everything happens in God's timing, right? But I believe that to be the case. But I wonder sometimes if, what could have been had this points earning series started 2 or 3 years ago? Do you think that the following exists? I mean, it's interesting, or maybe this has changed, but this deal has the points earning series, the Radial Tire Outlaws Championship Series, is focused primarily on Pro 275, Limited Drag Radial, and Ultra Street, correct?
Well, they also did include X275, and now RVW has made a comeback to the series for the Radial Outlaws. So again, we're in year number 6 with our X275, Ultra, and now Limited 235 as well. And I think what we've seen is an uptick now with RVW cars coming back out of the garage in the shop. Definitely Pro 275, and now, of course, LDR, which has also run its own series championship. Getting everything under one roof has really sort of allowed these racers to give something to focus on and focus to and try to achieve. Most of the time you achieve race wins and things like that, but if you can put those things together and have a championship hat or a trophy to hang up in your man cave, so to speak, that's something to look back on and know that you've had great success in this Radial arena.
I tend to agree. For the longest time, that was one of the hacks, right? Like if you wanted to get racers to commit to multiple events and touring around, you about had to have a points earning championship. And I think that was one of the things that made Donald Long's events so unique, is that he was able to generate that level of interest and generate this insane level of participation without a points earning championship. So it's going to be fun to see kind of how this deal evolves and what the radial world looks like in 2023 once one of these championship series are under their belt, so to speak. Whenever you look at the top of radial racing right now, I've often in the past kind of likened Radial versus the World to NHRA's Top Fuel and Pro 275 to NHRA's Funny Car. These two categories that are at the top of the mountain that could most assuredly be the marquee attraction on their own, one or the other. How do you feel about that? I mean, we've had a lot of questions over the course of the last several episodes of this show. People wondering, have we officially seen Pro 275 kind of become where the action is?
I think so. I think with the focus of the Pro Line and Fuel Tech groups and the racers that are in their stables and utilize their tuning skills, I really think the focus on Pro 275 now. But also, Donald has gone back and readjusted some of the rule sets and things like that to sort of rein it in, because we've already been down the road in multiple different organizations where we see things peter and fizzle out when they get too fast. And the money gets too great and everything else like that. So I think what you're seeing is a group effort across the board in all the classes. Jason Ruckert, myself, everything that we do within the PDRA, everything that we do as far as radio racing, we're really trying to keep this stuff in check and rein it in, while still allowing these racers to flourish and present their best to the crowd.
There's no doubt. And I do want to remind folks that tonight, coverage of Lights Out begins at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight on flowracing.com. Longtime supporter and friend of ours here at Drag Illustrated. Make sure you log on to flowracing.com/Drag Illustrated. If you haven't signed up for their subscription-based service, best $150 you're going to spend in the sport of drag racing. I found myself queuing it up this past weekend, and it still blows my mind every time I'm able to get on my iPhone or on my Roku or whatever and pull up live drag racing programming pretty much any given moment. So very special thing. Let's talk a little bit about the PDRA. Obviously, we want to talk about X275 and all the radial tire racing stuff that's going on. But what are you looking for this year, and as far as the PDRA is concerned? We saw great participation. Perhaps the PDRA's best year yet is kind of what we felt 2021 was, like their best showing. Are you excited about the opportunity to kind of maintain and carry that momentum into this season?
Man, I got to tell you, I'm really excited to see what this year brings. It's going to be my second full year with them, working with Tommy and Judy and Tyler, some of the best folks in the business. Again, grateful for the opportunity. We've brought a couple of things and some wrinkles in, as we told the folks at PRI, into the tech arena. They'll continue to see those things. And I think what we bring to the table as far as PDRA is an uptick in the professionalism of what pro mod and top sportsman racing can be, but also some of our other classes, and also with the addition of the new small tire class, the Super Street 28s, which is basically an X275 Ultra Street style deal with a little more liberal rules as far as chassis and suspension go, but on a 28-inch tire slick. So now, track prep being what it is at radial events, we're not going to have to key in on that, and we'll let the slicks do the talking come the summertime, because we all know what the summertime brings with the heat and track conditions and everything. So I think what we'll see is we'll see some tightening up in Nitrous Pro Mod. Pro Boost is going to be a dogfight, as it always is. I think what we'll see is hopefully some of the screw cars taking advantage of what's being offered to them in the class, and we'll see a couple more folks show up with some of the screw cars, maybe changing over from roots or things like that. So again, it's going to be one of those things. And then I really am proud of what we've accomplished as far as tightening up things in Outlaw 632. If you've seen any of the qualifying rounds in Outlaw 632 at PDRA, if you look at the first event versus the last event and how close we've gotten the racing, I think that's the one to keep the eye on.
I couldn't agree more. And I've been saying this for like 2 or 3 years. Pro Outlaw 632, people have slept on that. That may be like the hidden gem of the Professional Drag Racers Association, of a multitude of different cars, right? People from all walks of the racing life, full tube chassis cars, a couple of back half hot rods, some latest, greatest stuff, but some kind of older cars that come from other parts of our sport and have managed to find their way into 632 racing. A fantastic class, man. Another class that I'm super excited about seeing what happens in 22 is Extreme Pro Stock. If we could find if the stars and moon would align and everybody that has one of those cars showed up at the same event at the same time, that is another class that could sneak up and steal the show for the PDRA at any given moment.
It would be amazing to see, a full 32 car field of Extreme Pro Stock cars. We know they're out there. We just we need to do maybe a little more to entice those guys to come out and get them racing with us. We came so close to breaking that barrier and getting that 399 at the World Finals in Virginia Motorsports Park at the end of the year. It just didn't happen. We all know that it takes the stars to align and everything to be just right. And maybe if he would have breathed a little differently, it would have fell into that 399 zone, and he would have had that nice big trophy from Liberty. but it wasn't meant to be. And I'm sure this year we'll see more dog fights as we had in 21 in Extreme Pro Stock, and we've got some good folks coming back out.
Well, let's talk specifically about Lights Out 13. I want to talk about the class that you have been the driving force behind for so many years now, X275. I said during the U.S. Street Nationals, we did a post-race recap, and I was looking, unfortunately the event ultimately got canceled, rough conditions down there at Bradenton Motorsports Park. But during early qualifying, I told anybody who would listen, man, these X275 guys are going to steal the show. Like, listen, I'm looking for some Pro Mod guys to go fast or set some records, but all the side-by-side 420 runs, small blocks, big blocks, single turbo, twin turbo, night. I mean, the cornucopia of hot rods that exists right now in X275, it's hard to beat anywhere else in drag racing. Just, can you look back at all the time that has passed, all the drama, the racers that have come and went, the racers that have been there since the beginning and that are still there, the new faces that have found themselves, who have arrived at the X275 party? From the perspective of like a proud father, I mean, are you blown away at how far this brand of drag racing has come and how significant it still is after all these years?
I don't think in my wildest dreams I could have ever thought that it would be as successful as it is. I mean, companies have put the X at the end of their part numbers to let people know that it is an X275 approved part. Tires, turbochargers, superchargers, and the like. So when you look at that, you kind of stand back, and I'm a little detached from it just because I want to stay humble. I never want to thump my chest about how great it is, because as we all know, it could be gone tomorrow. So I want to remain humble, but I'm also a proud papa and very happy and feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. There are often days that I question my sanity as to why I do what I do, but in the end, it's for the sport and it's for the greater good of this group of people that believe in me and believe in the rules. And I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure that those guys are taken care of, because they've been with me, and it's never been a smooth and easy ride. We've always had some bumps in the road, but some of that drama has created focus on the class and allowed people to go, man, what are those guys doing over there? And then when they see the diversity on the sheets, anything from, a diesel or an import or, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder combos, turbocharged, supercharged, big block nitrous, and of course, Ron Rhodes,
2JZ,
all block stuff. Yeah, we're seeing 2JZs with 5 speeds, but then we're seeing 2JZs with automatics. So, what other class has that opportunity to show diversity? And not only are we showing diversity, these guys aren't just field fillers. These guys, they run up hard, to the front, and they make the other guys, the established guys, know that they're there.
JT, I'd love for you to bring Mike back into this conversation for me, because I want to use him as a reference here. Mike, thanks for coming back, buddy. I wonder, was this the plan initially, John? Because one of the things that Mike and JT and our whole group here at Drag Illustrated have talked about many, many times is how masterfully you guys, yourself, your wife, your son, the team, everybody that's been involved in X275, you basically franchised a brand. You franchised a rule set. Was that the plan going in? Because let's be honest, I don't see people setting up tents at NHRA national events selling t-shirts that say funnycar.net on them or promod.net on them. I don't know there's another class in drag racing. I mean, I would like to believe that I'm the ultimate pro mod aficionado, right? But still, There's not a brand that's built around it necessarily, but you have. I mean, X275 is like a way of life. It's a brand. It's something that it can stand on its own. And I think Mike will echo that. You don't see that in any other style of racing. Am I wrong? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, no, we don't see that. And I think the cool thing about it is that it's created that standard rule set that is then, like you said, franchised and available to all these different organizations. And I think that that's something we lack throughout the rest of these classes. So I think I mean, my hat's off to you. Kudos to you for being able to do that. And we need more of that. So you kind of made the blueprint for it.
Did you know that this is what you were doing, John? Was this the vision?
Well, so initially the whole thing is I come from the era when Buddy Ingersoll ran Pro Stock, and I was a Buick guy in the 90s running Buicks and whatnot. And I always wondered why they couldn't get a rule set to include, V6s and inline sixes and everything else like that. So as I wrote rule sets, I'm like, what do we need to do to keep these things all competitive across the board? And then you go into us making videos at different events and us covering different events and taking pictures and putting up the round sheets and the qualifying sheets and giving people an identity within the class to help the class itself grow, so people can recognize, there goes Ron Rhodes, there goes Rob Goss, there goes, Eric Moore, there goes the Bruder brothers, there goes, all these different guys that have run with us throughout the years. They have an identity within the class, and the class has grown because of those people. And I always likened our logo, which is like that /X. It's sort of like somebody ran by and put a gang tag on your building with a paintbrush. Right. And that's sort of our mentality with that New World Order. My whole thing as we started to ramp this up and it started to gain traction was to be the standard of 275 racing within the Radial world. And I've been a small block guy to the end, and that's why we are primarily a small block class, although we do have big blocks on nitrous in there, which with some recent rule changes, we've allowed them to come back into the fold, and hopefully this weekend at Lights Out 13, we'll see some of those guys maybe get some complaints on Monday about how fast those nitrous big block cars are.
I think I literally, John, for like over a decade have been using X275 or right around as an example of how things could be. Just imagine, put your, rose-colored glasses on and imagine a world where something like X275 existed in Pro Modified.
Right. That's been the problem.
Existed in, because I think that's hurt Pro Mod. The success of X275, in my opinion, at this moment in time is almost, obviously there's been some people that have been the heroes of it. People such as yourself. You've had some superstar personalities, the Brooders, Dean Arenas, Ron Rhodes. You've had some guys that have helped you make it fashionable and make it a popular eliminator to compete in. But man, this unified rule set that has been consistent and for years and years and years, you being willing to make tough decisions, right? To outlaw things or to ban combinations or to accept to be inclusive while at the same time extremely restrictive. If we could have a taste of that in Pro Modified, who knows where that brand of drag racing could end up, because our biggest issue with that particular style of racing is how bastardized it is, right? I mean, right. Everywhere across the country has their own version of it. Not the case with X275.
No, and you have to understand, Pro Modified doesn't belong to just one person or one group of individuals that are like-minded. Everybody has their own mindset of what, true Pro Mod racing is. And when that happens, you get fractures and splinters in there. Whereas I live and die by what I do in X275. And if you can have a group of people that are like-minded that want to push things in that direction, I think it's achievable. You just have to get the right people together at the right time. And I've been, benefited by, Donald's big push for Radial racing. X275 is clearly benefited by that. There's a lot of other sponsors, Monty up at Yellow Bullet and all the other people that we've worked with have always just said, it's your baby. You do what you think is right. If you need somebody to lean on, give us a holler, but we'll support you no matter what. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that people have a hard time overcoming is the fact that they don't have the backup and they don't have a group of people around them with a like mindset.
We have someone in the comments here in our last few minutes together, John. I'd love for you to. We have a viewer asking that what is X275 tire size and class? X275, and I'd like for you to ultimately define it. But briefly, overview is a cars that are limited to stock style suspension and a 275 millimeter wide rear tire, and there's a variety of weights based around different engine combinations. What else would you add to that as an overview, John, of what X275 racing is for the uninitiated?
So for the uninitiated, it is stock appearing, stock style cars that are true to the original intent of drag radial racing, which harkens back to the street racing days. We have really gone out of our way to make sure that combinations are small block combos, like I said, except for the nitrous big block cars. And with that being said, we've limited things to what would be a more street style turbocharger, let's say, like an 88 millimeter. We don't allow anything bigger than that. We've worked hand in hand with manufacturers to create these 88 millimeter street style turbochargers, or F3D 102 or the XB 102 blowers out of ProCharger and Vortec. And we literally want to make sure that these cars still retain that stock style look that you can relate to as a fan from in the stands and go, man, my Mustang looks pretty close to that, or my Camaro looks pretty close to that. Granted, it's not quite as fast, but it sure does look pretty cool.
It's a great class. Great class.
And you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, for years, fans, members of the racing community have talked about improving or increasing the relatability, that exists amongst these cars. You get the big hood scoops, you get the wheelie bars, you get the big tires, you get the stance, and you get pretty far away from what a street stock appearing vehicle looks like. And it gets more and more difficult to relate to those, or to, harken back to your glory days in high school when I had one just like that. But that seems like you can say that about every car in X275. Last question before we let you go, John. Conditions are typically favorable at Valdosta, Georgia, at South Georgia Motorsports Park this time of year. We've seen Lights Out for over a decade produce mind-bending performances, some of the most talked about happenings of the season. Do you expect to see any records fall this weekend? Do you think there's any history on the horizon at SJMP this weekend for the 13th annual running of Lights Out?
I think we're going to see maybe a few records broken. I don't know if it will be true ET records in RVW and Pro 275. Conditions look good for the nitrous cars. It's a little warm out here, so I don't think the DA is going to be quite conducive to some of the boosted cars really challenging setting some of those records that they already hold. But I think for the most part, I think what will happen is you'll see some of the tightest fields you've ever seen at a Lights Out event in a long time. We've teched probably close to 200 cars over the past 2 days, and there's more coming in the gate as I sit here in tech, taking a few minutes out to talk with you guys today. We've seen car counts grow in some of the smaller tire categories like limited 235. So it's showing that there is still a move towards some entry-level drag racers coming out to the track and trying their hand at this radial thing.
It's super exciting, man. And we wish you guys nothing but the best this weekend, John. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks, John.
Let's put the pressure on you right now to come back and give us a recap. I was planning to come down at least for a couple of days, but with this bum arm of mine, I'm not going to make it. I'm a little fearful of flying right now. But Team Drag Illustrated, we got a handful of guys that'll be down there on the grounds capturing photos and videos, and I'm sure they'll bump into you. But I look forward to seeing you soon, and I hope you guys have a great, safe weekend in Valdosta, brother.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you, brother.
We're going to swing that pendulum hard right now, man.
I know, right?
From X275, Lights Out, and we've got NHRA Funny Car winner from the Winter Nationals, Robert Hight, in the green room.
I got to tell you, this is what I'm telling you. If I had to say what I am most proud of, And I point to the Drag Illustrated 30 Under 30, the DI Awards last week, everything that we've done in the 16 years that this company has existed. I'm super proud of the fact that we've never been afraid to make people guilty by association. Like, I'm so proud of the fact that we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about X275 racing, small tire outlaw racing, and now we're about to talk to one of the biggest stars that our sport has ever produced in Robert Hight, the winner of this past weekend's NHRA Winter Nationals and Funny Car competition. It's just so good. Robert Hight doesn't need it as much as those guys do, but it's so good to let them feel some of that, like I said, guilty by association, to be mentioned in the same breath as some of our sport's highest accomplished competitors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him on right now, the one and only Robert Hight.
Come on, guys.
Hey, Robert, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know you're probably doing the winners PR and media tour after taking the win at the season opener out in Pomona, man. But let me ask you this. From every piece of content that we've consumed from the Winter Nationals, you seem to have a fire in your belly here in 2022. And I'm not saying it hasn't been there in the past, but it is air apparent here and now. Is that the case? Is something new happening?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. After the season we had last year, we're on a vengeance. We really want to rebound and be back in the thick of things. Going to the end of the year and not being in the hunt for the championship is no fun, especially when you have everything in place. Nothing's changed. All the same people. We just didn't get it done last year and we struggled. So we have everything. And we've kind of gone back to our combination from 2019 in the clutch department. And so far it's paid off. I'm really excited that we're moving right to Phoenix, with a little momentum. And then also we were there just a couple of weeks ago and this Auto Club Chevy ran really well.
Do you think that that was one of the things that we heard a lot about during the off season, is people kind of gearing up for what could be a challenging season in terms of supply chain issues? Are some of these changes that you've made, like you mentioned your clutch program, do you have to keep those supply chain issues in the back of your head when you're making big moves like that, potentially, that, hey, we could have an issue where we struggle to get our hands on a certain clutch disc, or those things that you're having to factor in to your decision making here early in 22?
No, we're in pretty good shape there. Bonifani Friction Company is a great partner with John Force Racing, and we're in good shape with clutch discs. So it's really how we ran the clutch that, is different. And, now that we manufacture most of our parts in-house, we tried to be ahead of this whole game. We could kind of see what was coming, and we have a lot of materials, so we can make the clutch levers and all the different things that we need in-house. We're not hurting for any parts right now, but later on in the year, you could see some issues with things that we don't have any control over: rods, pistons, crankshafts. We've tried to stay ahead of the game, but if you have a couple bad weekends, it kind of puts you behind the 8 ball.
One of the things that we feel that we're seeing here early in 22, obviously we're only one race in, but we're seeing kind of a newfound autonomy, specifically in Top Fuel. You got guys like Antron Brown going out, fielding their own team. Obviously, Ron Capps, who you faced in the final this past weekend in Pomona, fielding their own operation. Josh Hart came out in a big way last year with his own operation, and we're seeing kind of a new era of Nitro racing. Did you feel that in the pits? Was there anything that felt different to you about this past weekend? Coming off a time when you'd see 8, 10 Don Schumacher rigs, to see that team have one car and as compared to 4, 6, or 8. Could you sense a new era? Was the atmosphere any different this past weekend? Could you sense it, Robert?
Yeah, it's a little different. One thing I noticed in one of Ron Capps' posts, and he talked about, he showed a post where his family was standing behind his race car on the starting line, and he said, that was the first time in 20 some years that his family got to stand behind the race car, and that's because he owns it. And maybe it wasn't allowed before. I don't know, but things like that are different. What what I'm proud of is that we didn't lose any cars. Okay, we actually gained a few, and these guys that bought their own equipment and moved on, they're still out here racing with us, and they're making an investment in the future, and that shows that NHRA drag racing is going to be around a while.
It is an exciting thing, and you see these people making these levels of investment, the trucks, the trailers, the facilities that are required, the manpower that's required, not for the faint of heart. And to see so many people willing to take that leap of faith, I think it says a lot of positive things about the sport of drag racing, being kind of the tip of the spear for John Force Racing, Robert, and overseeing the operations there from a business standpoint. What's your take on the state of affairs here in drag racing at this point in time? We saw Camping World come in, a new series sponsor last year, kind of saving the day for NHRA championship level drag racing. But we're seeing a lot of new brands. From a business perspective, how excited and how confident are you about the future of high level drag racing right now?
I'm very confident. The pandemic hurt everybody, and that kind of took us a few steps back. And, first you got to rebound from that, and then you got to move forward. And I think everybody's doing their best. Like you said, we're seeing some new brands out there, some new blood. We're seeing it here at John Force Racing. We've got some interest and things cooking, and we got Austin Croc's car back. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, and everybody's got to keep working hard at it. And to see these guys go out on their own though and make these investments, that shows they're in it for the long haul.
It's exciting times, man, to see the new brands, to see some guys come back. Like it was odd these last few years not having Tony Schumacher's name anywhere on an entry list, right? It just seemed unusual. And it's nice to see some familiar faces back, but also some fresh ones that we haven't seen a whole lot out of. When you look at the funny car category right now, who do you see as, is it going to be Ron Capps that's going to be, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, that feels like there could be a very natural rivalry there, right? A lot of people put a negative connotation on that rivalry term, like it's got to be a couple of bad guys punching each other in the face or something. But you guys are both well-known, gentlemanly, world-class racers. But do you get excited about the notion of having like a certain guy that you get up a little bit more so for when they're in the other lane? Do you like the idea of leaning into some of those rivalries?
Oh, definitely. You've got to have those. And, funny car is like I've said before, funny car is one of the classes that doesn't need a countdown. It's going to be 5 or 6 cars battling it out from the start of the year to the end of the year. And it could be anybody. You got to be on your game, whether it's your car or the driver. But yeah, winning the Winter Nationals, you face 2 world champs, in a row. And one of them's the reigning world champ. Capps is going to be tough all year. Hagen is always tough. They have good teams behind them, good funding. There's a lot of good cars. Task is good. John Force, Cruz Pedregon. He got a new team last year. He's going to be right in the thick of things. J.R. Todd, Alexis, all these people, they're going to be, you better have your A game on when you go to the starting line. It's going to be a battle, and I'm up for it. It's the Winter Nationals was fun. Got to race 2 big guns the last 2 rounds, and every one of these races you're going to have battles like that. So it's exciting for me.
I think it's fantastic. We labor over this point, but we do it with purpose. Like, where would the NBA be without the Lakers and the Celtics, right? That rivalry transcended basketball. It was a big deal. It had people on opposite ends of the country genuinely despising one another over the colors that they wore. It was a very important part of taking basketball to the next level. And I think that having some of these rivalries start to develop and having the NHRA, the media types, our racers ourselves lean into those things instead of lean away from them, it could bode well for the sport of drag racing. How about, what can you say about...
There's also another dynamic that's different about NHRA drag racing or NASCAR is the manufacturers' rivalries, okay? And I think that plays into this too as well. Chevrolet versus Ford and Chevrolet versus Dodge or Toyota. That's a big deal. So I think that kind of gets the fans all up, based on what manufacturer they like.
100%. Like, drag racing in so many ways has been built on the back of brand wars. And it's been sad, to be honest, the last few years to kind of see that wane. And I'm genuinely excited. When we saw Ron Capps get up on the tire a little bit about Dodge, maybe not doing what he wanted them to do, focusing their attention elsewhere, he was very outspoken about it. And I thought, oh, this could be good, because we've got JFR married to Chevrolet. We got the Tascas flying the blue oval. We now have Toyota in the thick of things with this brand new body that everybody seems to be drooling over, except for us Chevy guys. But it's a really cool thing to see. And if we can see more of that, to your point, it will only help the sport of drag racing. We need, a lot of times, it's hard to find something to latch onto. And if especially for the new person to our fan that maybe doesn't know your backstory, the fact that you started out working on one of these cars, right? Started out as a crewman doing all the things that most people don't want to have to do, and eventually ended up behind the wheel. If you're driving a Chevy and they're driving a Chevy, it starts that relationship. It's that initial spark. And we need as much of that as we can get. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Robert, is going back to what I just said about getting your start crewing on a car. Looking around our sport right now, a lot of fresh faces in the crew chief roles, a lot of crew chiefs moving around. And that's something that JFR has been known for a long time. Early on, it was the brain trust, right? Bernie Federley and Austin Coyle. What do you think about, are we producing the next generation of those guys? Are you proud of not only what JFR has done to create the next generation of Nitro tuners, but all these teams?
Oh, definitely. You look at Dean Antonelli, he won the championship.
Yes.
And, he started right here within 3 months of when I started at John Force Racing. So, there's been a lot of people come through here and learn the ropes. Tim Fabrizi's another guy who has worked his way up the ropes and, is co-crew chief on John's car. He's going to be a big time tuner one of these days. Already is, he's a big part of the reason John runs well. So that's the goal. And, I can say Jimmy Prock is and Chris Cunningham, they're very good at training guys. Okay. They are open arms to helping and teaching, not just how to work on a race car, but the tuning procedures and what they do. So, they want to see these guys come up and eventually replace them someday.
And I think that's important, because we've joked in the past that drag racers, we're kind of bad about eating our young, right? We aren't super receptive because to the next generation or the next crop of folks sometimes, because there is a fear that, I've heard this so many times, that a guy comes to a team and he gains way more knowledge than he brings typically, right? A new guy comes into the fold and he learns a whole lot, and you have to be wary of the fact that he may take all that information and head on down the road, right? And it's been cool to see teams like JFR so dedicated to that next generation of racers. I think it'd be criminal not to talk about this. We started the show, Robert, and not to bring up a sore subject, but I am curious. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, after the incident we saw there with Trevor snagging the throttle linkage there, and a little scary moment, unfortunately. You were able to keep yourself together. It was cool to see you climb out of the car and not really be at all concerned about what happened, or did we win, or what did it run. You wanted to know how your crew guy was. Knowing you the way that I do, I wasn't at all surprised, but to me, it begged the question, do you think we'll see a time in the future where we see crewmen outfitted in fire suits or crewmen outfitted in helmets? Is that something that you think people would be receptive to, or is necessary? Because let's be honest, that was a freak accident that we don't see happen very often. But the starting line of a drag strip is inherently a very dangerous place for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, and it's not just funny cars. Do you think that that's something that could be accepted at some point in the future, much like a NASCAR pit crew or an F1 pit crew, where the guys that are standing around this car are decked out in SFI approved fire pants and jackets?
I don't know. It wouldn't be a bad idea, that's for sure. But these guys have to go back and work on these cars. It's a little different than a NASCAR pit stop that's only,
right,
15 seconds, and then they can kind of take a breather and get cooled off a little bit. These guys got to go back and work for an hour straight. And it'd be tough to work in that kind of that gear. We've got to be careful. Maybe there's some new things we can figure out to where the linkage is covered better, and a body, even if it hits it, it's not going to open the throttle. There's got to be some ways to make this better. Both crew members are doing fine. We were very fortunate. Could have been way worse. So got lucky. You were talking about working on the car. One of the jobs I've never done is lift the body. I've never had to do that. And I don't think I really want to either.
It takes, I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, Robert. It's like, it takes some balls to be that guy, right? I mean, no matter how involved you are, that's a high pressure environment, right? I mean, whether it's qualifying or the final round, I mean, there's just so much pressure on every individual guy. And that's why I think drag racing doesn't often get the credit it deserves for being a team sport, because you can have Robert Hight behind the wheel and you can have the best crew chiefs in the world, but if the guy putting air in the tires puts 27 pounds in the right one, you're screwed, right? Yep. I mean, that one guy, his involvement, it makes a difference. And I just wonder, sometimes people don't quite understand how everybody plays a significant role in the success of that car.
Oh, without a doubt. Every single job is as important as the next, because if one gets missed or not done properly, like you say, you're done. So this is definitely a team sport. That's one thing I love about it. You have 7 crew guys, 2 crew chiefs, and the driver all pulling in the same direction. And when at the end of the day, when you get the job done, that's what makes it really special to me, is that you work together and you did it as a team. And I've got some new guys this year, and guys that have moved around, moved from one position to another, and so far they're doing a really good job.
What do you think? One of the things that we hear from racers a lot is, how do we make it? How do you get to the next level? As someone who has started from the bottom of the drag racing world and worked their way to the highest levels, a world champion in Nitro funny car competition, what would you say to some of those young folks that are, maybe considering going out on the road with a team and staring down the barrel of a less than glamorous job, working on a clutch or swapping cylinder heads or being the bottom end guy? What advice do you give the young guy or gal that comes up and says, "Hey, I want to do what you're doing"?
Well, it's obviously work hard, stay in school and get a good education. There's a lot of things, like you don't see kids working on cars anymore. And, there's very few kids that, come out of high school and they have the knowledge already to come work on a race team. They just haven't been exposed to that. It's a different era, but, find an old car, fix it up, work on it. It also keeps you out of trouble, on the weekends and after school. Just, there's a lot of things you can do. Look at Austin Prock. He went from driving, actually he went from crew member to driving, then the ride went away, back to a crew member, and he's driving again. Just shows his dedication and hard work. And if any young person follows that mentality, they'll do just fine.
How much do you think it has benefited you over the years, having an understanding of the way the car works and what's happening behind you or underneath you or in front of you? Because we hear that sometimes from fans who will say, "Man, it's hard to cheer that guy on because he's," and I don't mean to speak out of turn about anybody, and I'm not, slinging, not taking shots, but the hired gun driver, the shoe, right, that comes in and his job is only driving. Do you think it's an advantage for you to have a mechanical understanding of what's going on around you when you're making a run before or after?
Oh, without a doubt. That's the only way I ever could have gotten to and even done this job. Most everybody starts in the lower classes, at least alcohol, right? If super comp, alcohol, and just move their way up. I never had that. I never raced anything. So understanding the cars and what they're doing, where they're doing it, that was a big deal. My daughter, she's 17 years old. She's raced juniors since she's 8. she's way ahead of her dad, in laps and track time and, working on the tree and everything else. So it's a big deal for me how I started, just knowing the race cars. And I still try to keep on it and, understand what's going on and the changes they're making. I kind of like to know all that stuff, before I go jump on the gas.
Speaking of jumping on the gas, one of the things that we've seen intensify over the course of the last few years is the pressure on the shoulder of drivers to cut a light. Across the board in Top Fuel and Funny Car, the starting line is more important than perhaps ever before. What do you make of that? This kind of new age of higher expectations for cutting a light amongst Nitro drivers. Is that something that you think is going to continue to intensify, and the guys and gals are going to get better and better and better? Or do you think that we saw kind of like a high mark and we're going to see things settle down? And what have you done personally to elevate your starting line game?
No, I think it's only going to get tougher and tougher as the cars get closer and closer in performance. You're seeing lots and lots of cars that are within 100th of a second. Qualifying is tighter. Everything is tighter. So the big difference then is you got to work on your game on the starting line, and that's just the way it is. Luckily, I've always done pretty well, but I still work on things. I do a lot of eye exercises and things, because it all starts with your eyes. Okay. Everything is what you see. You can't do anything till you see it. And so I work on eye stuff, and my shooting, background has helped me a little bit with all that. And focus, you can't have a million things going through your head when you're up there on the starting line. So it's a mental game, and you got to always work on that. I try to make.
We'll see?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Robert. I'm sorry.
Every run I make, I go up there to cut a light and work hard at hitting it, because that's real practice. It's better practice than being, back on a practice tree.
What do you think that I can't remember what I was going to say. Gosh darn it. I stumble around on these things. I have 10,000 ideas written down on cocktail napkins. Oh, no, it was just going back to those starting line, that pressure. Do you think that we're going to see some of these guys that have previously only been drivers and now are team owners? I mean, as the general manager of John Force Racing, I mean, you're contending with a lot of stuff that's happening away from the racetrack when you roll into an event. Many of these drivers haven't had that experience where they've got other problems. They've got, the grill's broken in the hospitality tent and they got to find someone to cater. They haven't had that experience of putting out all these fires. Do you think we're going to see some of that show itself in 2022, where a guy's maybe got more on his plate than he's ever had before? I mean, he probably thought he had a lot on his plate when all he needed to do was cut a light. But now he's got to cut a light, entertain sponsors, make sure he goes and sees the Chamber of Commerce president, all this other stuff. Are you excited to see how that unfolds this year?
Yeah, a little bit. I think all these guys are definitely capable of handling all this and wearing different hats. But it might be a little bit of a transition for them. But truthfully, when they start that, 12,000 horsepower engine in front of you, it's pretty easy to focus. You got to pay attention.
Yeah, it's hard to care too much about anything else, man. It's an exciting time. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. We really just wanted to touch base, congratulate you on a heck of a start to the 2022 season. We can't wait to see how things happen in Phoenix and Vegas and everywhere else the NHRA may roam here in 2022. Congratulations. Thanks to Sarah Slaughter for helping us organize this, and I hope to get the chance to talk to you again soon, brother.
Thanks for having me. This is a cool show, guys.
Hey, thank you very much, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Man, we're plowing through them. 3 guests. We might have one more. I'm not sure if we're going to get another one in here or not. I know that it sounds like Erica Enders is braving the bad weather down here in Texas, and we may have to, punt on that one and bring her on next Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll see. She's due to join us any moment. If she can't, then I'm sure we'll get her on again soon. But yeah, the weather's crazy, so having to drive through ice and dodge that deal. I just saw like a weather map. It's like 70 right here where I'm at, and there's this huge slice where you guys are with the ice and everything. So just creating havoc.
Yeah, it really is, man. It's well, hey, we won't pressure it, and I do think that this is an interesting conversation to have, and I want to have it because I'm glad we got to talk to Robert a little bit about that incident on the starting line. And I want to clarify that I certainly don't think that guys that are crewing on these cars should be forced to wear a fire suit from the start of the day to the finish.
No,
but
just on the starting line. Maybe just for that one guy. Like you
maybe
said,
just for that one guy.
like in the gas man role or whatever.
But have you ever thought about how, I don't know about you guys, but have you ever had like a friend come to the races? It's their first time, right? Or you've got a sponsor that comes to the races and it's one of their first times. What's the first thing you do to make them feel included?
Get them a black hoodie.
No, close.
Take them on the starting line.
Yeah. You give them a crew shirt.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's like the ultimate part of the club movement to give somebody a sublimated collared crew shirt, right? I mean, so many of these fans get one given to them and then they wear it to the races for the rest of their lives. It's the only shirt they wear to the races. I've met people in the past that were given a crew uniform from somebody over the years, and they wear it to every racing related function they go to, because they know that it's like a sign of being part of the club. It's a sign of being invested. And I got to be honest, I don't think there's a crew member out there that wouldn't welcome that leveling up to where, like, hey, everybody gets a sublimated shirt, but only those of us that are touching the car are wearing a fire jacket and fire pants and a special helmet. I actually think it's something that our sport should look toward, because I want to be on the right side of history. I don't want to wait until something really, really tragic happens to then make a rule, because I think we could do it now. I really do. And I challenge some of these teams to be thinking about that. There's a lot of the teams out here that are very proud of their efforts to be safe or go above and beyond what is required, go far beyond what they are mandated to wear or mandated to do. And I would love to see perhaps just the guy lifting the body in a fire suit moving forward, or in a helmet moving forward. I don't think that would be a bad thing. I understand there'd be some initial pushback because it's a pain in the ass, right? And nobody wants to make anything more difficult than it already is. But I got to tell you, as someone who's crewed on cars my entire life, been around racing my entire life, I don't know that I would be upset at all if that was just part of it. I had to wear, if I was going to be up around this car within X amount of feet of it or considered a crew person, you need to be dressed accordingly, and you need to be focused on safety, because it's not just the people that are strapped into these things that can get hurt by them. I think it's something that we need to be pushing. I really do, because there's just so many things that can go wrong up there. So many things.
Yeah, but like Robert said, it's like, well, and I said it earlier too, where do you stop with it? And how far does it go? I think it kind of, to me, it goes back to the mentality of drag racing and kind of how it operates versus like a NASCAR or an F1 race, where all the work is done in the pits by the crew for the most part. And they're not wearing a fire suit there. A lot of stuff could happen there too, but they're not wearing it there. They're in their gear, their t-shirts, slacks, whatever. And then they put on their crew shirt to go up to the starting line. And there's not a ton for them to do there outside of, adjusting what the crew chief does, is lifting the body, those kind of things. If you're a pro stock guy, you really got to get your shoe game right to scrub in the gold dust. Right. If they miss it on the burnout, that's critical. But besides that, there's not a lot to be done. With a NASCAR race, F1 race, they prep the car in the garage or whatever. They're wearing normal gear. Then they go out to like a next level where they put on the suit, where they're like almost a part of the event. They're a part of the race. They're in harm's way. So it kind of just goes back to how drag racing operates compared to these other sports. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, but I think that there aren't enough differences, to be honest, that I don't know that a guy could come up with a whole lot of arguments against it. If the argument is just that it's uncomfortable, that's not valid, in my opinion. Right. I mean, if it's, I really don't. I mean, if you're going to be hot. Yeah, you're going to be hot no matter what, but you're only going to be hot for a few minutes, right? You're going to be hot. I would see this as something where we bring the pants and the jacket to the starting line with us. They're on the back of the golf cart. And when we're 3 cars back, you slide on your pants and you throw on your jacket and you go up there with the car and you handle your duties. Because, I mean, ask Roy Hill about getting ran over by a car, right? I mean, how many of these cars have we seen lunge backwards? I saw your dad roll across the deck lid of a car in Rockingham, North Carolina, right? When it backed up, and sent someone over sent your pops over the deck lid and wing. I just think about how many things can go wrong on the starting line, and a helmet or a jacket, I don't know. It may be worth.
See. It's one of those things. Unfortunately, it's going to take more. If the incident this weekend with Robert and his crew guy had been worse, we'd be talking about it more.
Yeah.
Or if it happens more often, but it really has been. I mean, there maybe have been one or two minor incidences between what happened this weekend and the Dickie Venables deal way back 16 years ago. But really,
it's amazing. There hasn't been more.
Few and far between.
It really is.
So it has to happen more often, I think, for us to start talking about it, unfortunately. But that's just racing, and that's where all safety innovations come from a bad thing happening. And it really just has to happen often enough or to a certain degree for things to change.
Yep.
I know that if I was a sponsor, I sure would like it. All my people up there in like matching outfits. I don't know that I would be totally against it. If
you're Stroud Safety, it maybe sounds like a new avenue, right? Or any of these safety companies, right?
Yeah, because maybe it's not necessarily a 21 layer suit or whatever. It's a very base model thing, but it's something that people could get behind. And I honestly think there's a lot of these crewmen and women that would take great pride in putting themselves first and their safety first, and getting ahead of it instead of being reactive like the sport of drag racing so often is. Ladies and gentlemen, we're headed here into the final half hour or so of the Wes Buck Show. Of course, thank you all so much for being a part of this. It's a joy each and every Wednesday to get to hear from you, to have this conversation in front of the entire world. So thank you for being a part of this conversation at Drag Racing's Water Cooler. As we close the show, we are lucky enough to be joined. She must have braved the bad weather and ice-covered roads that are all throughout here, Oklahoma and Texas, and returned home to Wynnewood, Oklahoma. I do see the one and only, in my opinion, the greatest to ever do it, Erica Enders in the green room. Let's see if this is her. Yeah, there she is. I thought that was you.
Hey, guys. How are y'all?
Hey, Erica.
Good. How you doing, Erica?
Good.
We are doing well, and but I don't think we're doing as well as you. We've spent a ton of time talking about today, Erica, what pro stock looks like in 2022. We've said for the last couple of years, this has been the most exciting class in all of drag racing, the best storylines, the funnest things to talk about. And you and your pro stock brethren delivered the goods again this past weekend in Pomona. How good does it feel to start this season off in that kind of commanding, dominating fashion, qualifying number one, winning the race, taking out Greg Anderson along the way, but competing against one of your teammates, Aaron Stanfield, in the final? I mean, that was some icing on the cake. No matter what, Elite Motorsports has taken home a Wally. What was it like starting the season?
I think we're getting a little bit of feedback. Do you have the volume on, Erica?
Me?
Do you have a feed on of the show? It's like feeding back a little bit.
Oh, yeah, you might have to mute it.
I don't know what that means.
No. She's good.
No,
okay.
Go ahead, Erica.
Okay. Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, over the off season, the guys put in a lot of hard work in the engine shop, and we felt like we had definitely found some horsepower and made strides in a direction that we've been hoping to go for quite some time. But Kyle Bates, Jake Harrison, Stephen Hurley, Kendall Long, Carl Foltz, all the guys that make it happen in the horsepower department, we really felt like we, again, made some strides, and you really don't know if it will translate from the dyno to the racetrack until you get there. So with the private test that we had in Bakersfield before Pomona, we really weren't able to compare our numbers with anybody because we were the only team there testing with all 7 cars. So when we got to Pomona, it was pretty refreshing to go out off the trailer. Both Aaron and I ran a 652. I think mine was with a 1, his was with a 7 or 8, and we secured the number 1 and 2 positions for the qualifying field, and it held up through the next couple qualifying sessions. So it was definitely exciting to start off on the right foot. You know, I know it's a long season, and so many things will change, and so many things will happen, and not all things are going to be great either. But it was really cool to get it done in Pomona. It's my first Winter Nationals win in 18 years of driving pro stock, and I was really stoked that it was the 900th national event for pro stock. That was exciting and really cool to get that Hurst Shifter trophy to bring home back to Oklahoma.
That shifter was spectacular. I had no idea they were going to do that, but it certainly was awesome. We talked at the beginning of the show, Erica, and I think some people, this is lost on them a little bit. I mean, you spent, 7, almost 8 years in pro stock before you scored your first win, July 2nd, 2012 at Route 66 Raceway in Joliet, Illinois. I still remember that moment like it was yesterday. Is it hard to wrap your head around the fact that, it took 7 years to get one, and then the following 7, 8, 9 years, you've gotten 33 more, 4 world championships. I mean, I think sometimes people forget that there were some dark days in Erica Ender's pro stock career. People want to act like this is the first time that you've ever faced adversity, but we saw you face adversity and conquer that for years and years and years. It's crazy to see you take a second place finish so hard, because you've definitely had it worse, right?
Yeah, we definitely have. And those 7 years that you speak of weren't, that was before social media was a huge thing, and the results weren't real time, and you had to wait for the TV coverage or somebody to text you about it. It was, those 7 years were hard. I mean, I started out with Victor Cagnazzi, learning how to drive in 2004, made the pro debut in 2005, and we went to a couple final rounds in 05 and 06, but we're never able to get it done. After leaving Vic, I drove for Schumacher. My dad and I bought the operation off of Dom Schumacher. We ran it at Zenders Racing for a year, had trouble securing sponsors, and then I went to drive for Jim Cunningham for a couple of years. And God bless him, it was great. It was seat time, right? And all of the races that we knew when we pulled in the gate, we were probably not going to qualify. Like, I just made a huge effort to keep my name and my face out there, to meet people along the way, to shake hands and kiss babies, as you say, to go sit on the guard wall on the starting line and see the procedures that these other drivers were doing. So one day when I had the opportunity to race them, I would know what was going on up there and what their nuances were and what their routines were. And all of that stuff plays such a huge part in the driver that I am today. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for all of those moments. But winning in 2012, like you said, taking 7 years to get that first win, and then since then being able to accomplish what we have so far, I don't feel like we're close to being done yet. But at the same time, even if we were, what a great 9 years I've had here at Elite Motorsports. So we've had a lot of fun along the way, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are way more valleys than there are peaks, as I always say. And there are days you want to bang your head against the wall, Wes, as you know, and it's tough. It's pretty grueling and challenging out there. And that's the stuff that a lot of people don't get to see. So, making my way through that journey to get to where we are, I feel like it makes me even better. It makes me stronger. It makes me tougher. It makes me a better driver, and maybe a little bit smarter too. But I would have rather taken that journey and be here than to just climb in a car that was capable of winning the world championship the first year out, because then you never really appreciate how hard this class actually is.
I don't know that it could be said any better than that, Erica, because that's one of the things that we've mentioned a lot, is that a lot of the headlines and the storylines, the narrative going out of 2021 was that you have consistently, snatched victory out of the jaws of defeat, right? You've gone into the last race or the last race or two, and you've been the difference maker. You've been able to get it done, come out on top. And I think the entire racing community was kind of waiting to see what Erica Enders looks like when it goes the other direction, when it isn't you holding the trophy at the end of the day. And I actually found it's been fun to see, because you could sense the fire in your belly every time you were in front of a camera this past weekend. And it's funny because, is it because you had to work so hard and there were so many of those dark days for so long that once you got that taste of success and had it consistently for a few years, now are you going, okay, I'm never going back to that. Like, we are not going back to that. I'm winning every time out, because it was almost like your desire to win and the chip on your shoulder this past weekend in Pomona I think it was bigger than anybody thought it would be. I mean, you've clearly got a fire in your belly to prove a point and be a difference maker this season.
Well, thank you for saying that. And yeah, I do have a fire under my butt, and so do my guys that work so hard on this race car and in the engine shop again. But I feel like it probably comes from, you never know what season's going to be your last, right? And you just have to capitalize on every moment that you absolutely can. And after the way that it fell last year, Greg Anderson had the car to beat. He was number one qualifier for 3/4 of the races plus, and still only won 4, just like we did, and still barely won the world championship. And I'm not knocking Greg. I'm just saying, had I executed better as a driver, had we maybe made a couple better runs here and there as a team, like shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? If the Crickets had pistols, the birds wouldn't mess with them, as Richard says. Like, if I had 2 rounds in the countdown go a different way, we would have secured our 5th world championship. And I feel like that's kind of what started this fire, was that I let some races go. I got beat on a hole shot in Dallas, Texas by my teammate Aaron Stanfield. I wasn't bad. I think it was 26, but he was 006 and he loaded us. But I needed that round for our 5th world championship. So I just, I want to make every round count. Again, I'm a human. We all have our off days, right? I'm the biggest variable, this whole puzzle, but I am going to do my very best to go up there every single time like it's my last time. And I want to park that Melling Performance Chevy Camaro in the winner's circle just as often as I can. And I do realize there are 15 other competitors in a 16-car field that probably feel the same, but every single time my money's on us.
Again, fantastic answer, because that we can sense it. You can sense it from afar, Erica, because we whenever we were looking at kind of the way 2021 shook out, it's hard not to, again, not a knock against KB Racing or Greg Anderson. They had an incredible year. But when you think about the way that car qualified and the fact that it would seem like they had the best car pretty much from start to finish, I think that the expectation would be that Greg wins by a landslide, right? And the fact that it was so close at the end, I mean, we'd be doing a disservice not to acknowledge that you guys made it a fight down to the last race of the season against a car that it was well known had you guys, right? And I just think that was, I don't know, it wasn't lost on us. We early in the season, when you think however many times in a row Greg qualified number 1, you're going, holy crap, he's going to have this whole deal wrapped up by Indy. And the fact that you guys were still in it at the end, it's been fun. But I want to talk real quick about your contribution to this, your reaction times this past weekend, 013, 016, 012. 050 in the final. Obviously, I got to see a clip, fortunately, that said I believe your glasses were fogging up there in the final and you didn't want to go red. But still, your average reaction time was an 034. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. Is that how you wanted to come out as far as your performance goes? Do you expect to tighten that up even more as the season wears on, or is that where you want to be?
No, it's 34 sucks in my opinion. If we throw out the finals and I was the first 3 rounds before that, my goal was to be under 20 all day long. When we went up there for the final round, like the weather changed a lot. It got pretty chilly. Some humidity snuck in, and I realized this totally sounds like a lame excuse, but it's 1,000,000% what happened. I pre-stage the car, and I always take a deep breath before I roll in and stage and just get in the tree. And when I took that deep breath, my eyeglasses and my helmet shield like completely fogged up. And I was already, as you mentioned, 12, 13, 16. I knew we had gone up on leave. I knew that the clouds had rolled in. So there are a bunch of different variables that I'm thinking about, right? And I don't want any negative thoughts in my head as I'm pulling up there. So I'm just like, crack it the same. If you're on the wrong side of it, you gave it all you had. But when that fog happened, as I was rolling into stage, I was just like, crap, for lack of a better word. And I sat on it a little bit. So we were 50 there. But to answer your question, yes, like I want to make every single round count. And you listen to the scuttlebutt and the landscape, as you mentioned, from the time I started in 2005 until now, I raced against a bunch of older guys. And now the landscape of Pro Stock has completely changed, where Greg Anderson's 60 something, I'm in my mid to upper 30s. And then we have a bunch of lower 30s and mid 20-year-old kids out there doing this. And I think it's awesome for our class. I think it, breeds new interest, and it makes it fun and exciting and fresh. But it's kind of like one of those things, you ain't coming on my home court and kicking my butt. Like, that's kind of the mentality that I want to have. Not that pro stock's my class. I'm just saying, like, that's the way I'm going into this. This is my house, and I'm going to do the very best that I can.
Well, I think that you have to have that mentality, right? I mean, you have to have the come take it from me mentality to compete at the level that you do. And I think it's exciting to hear. And it is interesting because I remember having this conversation with you, like back in the Slammer Milk days or whatever, that pro stock was, everybody joked that it was a yacht club, right? It was a good old boys club, V Gaines with a cigar hanging out of his mouth, and, you know, Troy Coughlin Sr. with his Gucci slippers on. I mean, it was well-to-do businessmen that primarily occupied the pits. And then there started to be some fresh faces. And it's crazy to think about where it is this season with 20 really good cars. You know, I mean, probably 12 or better cars that could win for sure on any given Sunday. Very, very impressive thing to watch unfold. What do you make of this, the thing that this drive for 5 has momentum? I hear people saying it so much. Is there any sort of marker for you mentally when you look at this and go, I mean, you could go down in history as the winningest female race car driver of all time? We argue here all the time that you're the best natural driver our sport's ever seen. And I think you continue to prove that. But I mean, are we seeing, is there anything like any writing on the wall that like, hey, how much more can an Erica Enders do out here?
I definitely have those thoughts at times. Like, you know, I am getting older, and what else can we accomplish? We just keep winning races and world championships. And the list of people that have won 4 world championships or more in pro stock is pretty short, and includes names like Bob Glidden and Warren Johnson and Lee Shepard and Jed Coughlin Jr. So to be mentioned alongside of those people is a huge honor in itself. But honestly, Wes, like, yeah, that's my goal. I want to win our 5th championship, and I want to pass Angelle in national event wins. God love her, she does an amazing job, but she has 40 something and I have 34 now. So it's definitely within reach. But I remember like it was yesterday when we tied Shirley Muldowney she has 18 national event wins. I got it when we won the 2015 U.S. Nationals in Indy, and what's happened since then is unbelievable. So I guess the answer is you just keep going, you just keep doing the best that you can. But if we're able to get our 5th world championship, that would be awesome to tie my freaking hero, Jed Coughlin Jr., who's got a ton of natural talent and can win in any class that he races in. Would definitely be really cool, and it would put a little bit more spread between myself, Angelle, and Shirley Muldowney, who both have 3 world championships. So it's just one of those deals you set your goals high, and even if you miss, I mean, I could totally hang my hat on 4 and be happy, but we're just gonna keep motoring on.
It's a ton of fun to have watched the like you said, the hills and valleys of this whole deal. I mean, you can't appreciate a good day if you don't have some bad ones, you know. So you have to have it ebb and flow. What headed into when you don't have a whole lot of downtime, right? We got a couple of days at home in Oklahoma, and then right out to Phoenix. What's your kind of forecast here early in the season? Are you guys still figuring anything out? Are you guys still trying anything, or are we seeing you guys kind of hunker down into race mode already?
No, we're definitely always trying to get better. We're always trying to move the needle forward. You know, Richard and the guys that I work with very well, and they're not ever satisfied, and neither am I, quite frankly. So I feel like we're gonna keep after it. We only had that one test session in Bakersfield this offseason, me, because I had surgery on my arm like you, and I was not able to test. And I made 2 runs on Wednesday prior to Pomona. That's the only time I've been in the car since November in Pomona last year. So it was definitely nice to get comfortable, to get reacquainted with my car again, and go out and park it in the winter circle. But I don't think we're anywhere near just hunkering down and getting into race mode. That's what happens when the countdown gets here. It's our job to continue to get better, to continue to grow, to continue to find more horsepower, make better runs, make our Rick Jones Camaro even better than it already is. And with Mark Ingersoll and Tim Freeman at the helm of that, I mean, I feel like the sky is the limit. So yeah, we're gonna do our best to position ourselves the best that we can headed into the countdown. But you know, there's a huge difference, and we talked about this on the airplane today. Like, there's a huge difference making really great fast runs during qualifying and racing. It's a different mindset. It's a different mentality. It takes a lot of different effort from a lot of people. So, and a lot of things actually have to go right. So we're just going to do our best on race day and hammer it out the rest of the year. And I don't feel like after one race you can say, oh yeah, I'm going to win the world championship. No, we got a ton of hard work ahead of us, and we know that. I know that ahead of us will be engine explosions and parts failures, and I'm not speaking those things into existence, but just from experience. I mean, poor Aaron came back after the semifinals with pieces of piston hanging out of the throttle body in front of the intake manifold and rods hanging out of the oil pan. Like, it was absolutely destroyed. And unfortunately, it just part of the game, right? You're going to have those days. And I know what's ahead of us. I know the challenges that are ahead of us, but my goal is to freaking put my head down and march forward and not let anybody come take the ball from me.
When you think about Richard, Royce Lee, Robert, but especially Mark Ingersoll, Tim Freeman, Jake Harrison, Kyle, the whole team there at Elite Performance and Elite Motorsports, what can you say about Mark and that whole group overseeing the effort of all these race cars? That's one of the things that I think is interesting, because one would think that if winning a 5th championship or winning a championship was the priority, maybe we would focus all of our attention on just this one car. But that's not at all been the approach at Elite Motorsports. You guys actually brought more cars into the camp with the addition of the Quadra cars in 2022, which seems to be bearing fruit already. Those cars made great runs this past weekend. What do you make of Mark's ability? And I don't mean to just single out Mark. I'm a big Mark Ingersoll fan, but the whole group's ability to babysit that many cars and make them all competitive.
So after our win this weekend, we were joking while we were loading up the trailer. Mark was saying, you know, a few years ago we had like 4 or 5 crew chiefs and 2 cars, and now we have 2 crew chiefs and 7 cars. He's like, you're doing it the wrong way, Big. But I mean, it's all hands on deck. We have Mark Ingersoll, Tim Freeman, Eric Lazinski, Anthony Lum, who worked on our Pro Mod car. He's come in to help Jake Harrison tuning all the EFI stuff on these Pro Stock cars. Bob Benza will be joining the camp in Gainesville. I believe Aaron Strong is scheduled to run some races with us this year. So there will be points in the season that we can occupy more than half of the field of 16 cars. So it's something that, as a little bitty 1-car team in 2014 that was going to run an abbreviated schedule and ended up going out and having amazing success, even skipping 2 races because Richard wanted to go on vacation and almost losing the championship that year. But I mean, to see what it's grown from, like 5 guys and me, to we had 43 crew members, not counting drivers and family members in Bakersfield testing. So this has become a huge operation. But Mark has, since Rick and Ricky went home, to run their business, and Ricky has 2 young children, and with COVID, they were taking extra precautions because of some health issues, and they came off of the road full time. And Mark's not in the best health, and a lot of people don't know that, but he took the bull by the horns, and he's traveled throughout COVID, even though he has lung issues, and he believes in this and us and our program and me. Like, he texts me throughout the week, like, you're badass. If you know Mark, he says that all the time with like a muscle emoji, and but just his passion for this and how extremely brilliant and talented Mark Ingersoll is. And his father was Buddy Ingersoll, so he, like us, has grown up around the sport and made a living at it for 30 and 40 years. And we joke with him that he's been around so long that he invented the shift light, but he's a huge asset to our program. And we definitely wouldn't be where we are today and could not do it without him.
He's a special, special guy. And every time I see him bust that tape measure out and check the wheelie bars on one of those cars and send someone into the beams, you can sense from 1,000 miles away how much he cares about each one of those cars and the people in it and the people around it. I feel lucky to have gotten to see it, to be honest. A couple of closing questions and I'll let you go. I know it's getting late in the day, Erica. Are you seeing, last year there was a lot of talk. I believe it was at the U.S. Nationals. The NHRA sat down with all their Pro Stock teams and kind of engaged you guys for some back and forth. Do you feel like Pro Stock is for all that we have, the praises that we sing here at Drag Illustrated, but across the industry, I mean, most all the cool stuff that's happening in drag racing for the last few years has happened in pro stock. Do you feel like the class is getting a little bit more recognition? Do you feel a little love, or the tide's turning? I mean, what's your take on where we're at as a class, speaking specifically about pro stock headed into the early parts of 2022?
I definitely think it's headed in the right direction. And, a couple years ago, after the rule change from carburetors to electronic fuel injection and a new fuel and a different tire, and I feel like pro stock was just really hammered with all of these super costly rule changes, and you saw less and less competitors. But Richard and Elite and Greg Anderson, Jason Line at KB Motorsports, we came together. We made a deal with each other that we were going to work together for the first time ever in the history of NHRA Pro Stock, because it's always been about, blankets over everything and covers over struts and shocks. And I mean, you just hide everything, right? And now it's more, we work together to bring more and more competitors out there. And it's kind of what I mentioned in my interview after we won the race in Pomona, was like, I am so proud being the 900th Pro Stock race just happened, and we were able to win it. I am so proud of how far Pro Stock has come. Like when I first started, yeah, we had 25 and 30 competitors at the U.S. Nationals, but week in and week out, lower 20s, right? And sometimes you would get to a race where you barely had a full field with 18 cars. But for a while there, we were Richard and KB were dragging extra cars out there and having guys come in and drive them so that we had a full field, and it looked well for our sport, for our class, and for TV. And now it's different. Like now I think we're gonna see excess of 20 cars at most of the races this year. And I think there's already 22 cars on the entry list for Gainesville. As I mentioned, Bob Benz is going to join the elite group when we head out east. But I'm really proud of it, because I feel like we collectively have played a huge role in the success that Pro Stock is having and the way that it appears now. And after Winter Circle on Sunday, Glenn Cromwell pulled my sister and I aside, and he was so genuine and kind about it. But he said, thank you guys. Thank you. And Richard and KB for what you guys have done for the class. We didn't do that. You guys did that. And that from the president of NHRA means a lot. Like they know that we're the ones that turned this deal around. So I feel like Pro Stock is definitely getting some more notoriety. I feel like the TV kind of still sucks, but that's really not what it's all about, right? We're B2B deals with sponsorship stuff, and we make our money elsewhere. But I'm proud of Pro
just
Stock.
Imagine. I mean, I'm proud for you, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because it's important to know that kind of feedback is coming from our sports leadership. That people like you are hearing those kind of things from the Glenn Cromwells of the world, and it makes me feel good to know that they're recognizing that. And just imagine if we were able to, like, if the stars and moon ever aligned and we're able to have this kind of competition and this kind of participation and a killer TV presence and all those other things, God only knows where this deal could go. Last question. Driving that bitch back has become a thing, right? What's that make you feel like, that there are people that aspire? I mean, I've seen junior dragster kids do it. I've seen pro mod guys do it. And everything in between. Did you ever think that would catch on like it has? And how proud of it are you? Like, it's become a movement, right? If you win, you pretty much have to drive the car back from the winner's circle to the pits.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that all day long I hear the fans come to the back of the pit for an autograph or to take pictures with the race car. And before they leave, they say, drive that bitch back this weekend. And when you're towing your car in front of the grandstands and the crowd's going crazy, you hear people hanging over the fence saying, drive that bitch back. So it's something that really caught on, and I'm thankful. It's pretty cool. But it happened in Charlotte in 2018. So after 2016 with the EFI rule change, we switched manufacturers and went to Dodge, and we went from number 1 in the world to number 9 and 10 in the world with myself and Jake Coughlin. So you talk about hero to zero very quickly. And switched back to GM Power in 17, only won one race in 17, only won a couple in 18 before we crawled our way back to the top in 19 and 20. But that happened in 2018 in Charlotte. And I remember we were fixing to leave the winner's circle, and Jake's like, why don't you drive it back? And I was like, really? Because, pro stock, you all the way to the water box, and then you
got to prime it. We got to take the oil pump belt off and prime it, right? Everybody's so sensitive. You want me to start this thing up?
Yeah, Jake's like, just drive it back. So I was like, all right, pull the scoop plug out. And my sister hopped in and she said, what are you about to do? Or when we got back to the pit, she said, what'd you just do? And that's what came out of my mouth. I had zero plan on it. I probably shouldn't have cussed on film, but I did. I said, we just drove that bitch back. A thing. And it's a thing. And we had over 500,000 people saw it, that video, and it just caught on like wildfire. And it's been a really fun thing since. But every time, my sister's in my door right before I fire the car, every single time. And I'm so thankful for her support. And she's my forever hype girl. And she's very passionate and very energetic. And sometimes I have to tell her to calm down a little bit. But she every single round, she's like, we're driving this bitch back today, So it's just really cool. And I absolutely love the process of it. And I think that in the videos that she posts, you can see it all over my face, how excited I am, how happy I am, how proud I am of what we've accomplished, and just enjoying that moment. Because when all of this is over, I'm not real sure that much will replace that feeling of, hitting the chutes, hitting the clutch at the finish line, and seeing your win light up on the guard wall. Like that feeling is something that I will probably miss dearly when it's all over. So I'm trying to take it all in.
Well, and I tell people all the time, like, if you haven't had that golf cart ride, like if you haven't ridden on a golf cart from the starting line to the finish line to the shutdown area to pick up your driver, that is I got chills just talking about it, because that's such a special memory. Like being a part of that very small group of people that are invested in what just happened, that whole moment is so magical. And you guys have added to it a ton by driving the thing back. And I hope you get to do a bunch of it in 2022, because it's a incredible tradition. And I hope it carries on for a long, long time, because it's a difference maker, man. It's a t-shirt now, right? You're probably going to get tired of hearing it one of these days. But Erica, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us on a Wednesday afternoon. We look forward to seeing you soon. I'm not going to make Phoenix because of this arm thing, but I do plan to see the squad down in Gainesville for the Gator Nationals. So be careful, stay out of trouble, and best of luck next weekend in Phoenix.
All right, Wes, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And again, I think the world of you, and I so appreciate your passion for our sport and the needed coverage that you give it, and especially Pro Stock. It means a lot to me.
Well, hey, you're welcome. Thank you so much. You guys keep winning races, and we'll keep telling the world about it.
Sounds like the plan.
Thank you. Tell everybody, hey, be careful.
I will. Thanks, you too.
See ya. I think I should have asked her about the fire suit thing, because I'm going to push this. I think crew guys should have to wear fire suits. Oh, wait, she's still here? Oh, JT brought her back.
I brought her back.
I'm crazy? Do you think I'm crazy after what we saw with Robert Hight and the body getting set back down, hitting the throttle slightly? I'm introducing a notion here today that I'm not so sure. I mean, you caught Chase's leg hair on fire in Vegas a couple of years ago. I'm not so sure that there shouldn't be some safety equipment or safety gear that our crewmen are wearing on the starting line. I think people are going to hate me for it initially, but do you think I'm totally crazy? Because that's a dangerous place. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. It's not just the throttle getting hit. I mean, all sorts of things. The engine can hydraulic. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong at any given moment. Do you think that I'm crazy to think that at some point in the future we could see, at least within the confines of the NHRA, the 3, 4, 5 key crew members wearing a certain garb and maybe some sort of open-faced helmet?
I definitely don't think it's out of reach. And I mean, you've seen all the crap on the internet. I've been called the safety princess because of the rules that we had changed after our terrible Pro Mod fire. And that very weekend, our team Pro Mod car, I went up after we exploded that car, and I was standing just away from the water box, and there was an engine that let go, and a piece of connecting rod hit me in my shin. So it's definitely a dangerous area to be. If you're not familiar with our sport, I think you have no business being up there, like younger kids and wives and whatnot. Yes. But you always have to be aware. So, and having said that, I jumped in at the tail end of your conversation about it when our interview first began. And so I'm not really sure what you said, but I feel like the rule changes that happen every year in our classes across the board are because somebody got hurt before. So we need to make it safer for the next guy, for the next idiot like myself who just wants to race and doesn't think about it when you hop in a race car. So I definitely feel like it wouldn't be a bad idea. Again, like you said, I feel like people would probably hate us for saying that because, some races we go to, it exceeds 100 degrees outside, but
right.
I mean, pants for sure. And what happened with Robert's guy, I got to talk with Robert about it at the finish line after we won together. And I mean, that's a scary deal. You could be seriously injured or killed standing around these 11,000 horsepower vehicles. Think about all the things that have to go right for it to stay together.
And he never would. And a guy like Robert, you'd never forgive yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that it's just an interesting thing because I don't know that anybody needs to be wearing a fire suit. Like, I don't anticipate Chase Freeman, as an example, wearing a fire suit from start to finish.
Because he won't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he won't.
Yeah.
We're going to make him do that.
I do think I could make an argument for, hey, you're 2 or 3 cars back and you're sliding on your, light flame retardant pants, and they don't need to be, it doesn't need to be a 21 layer suit. But I also think it could be a status symbol. Like, if I was crewing on a car, I would want to be one of the crewmen or women that is important enough to have to wear that stuff. Right. I think it could be a little bit, and it could add to the pomp and circumstance. Like, I've often thought that we should make, like, if I was the NHRA, I would mandate that every car has a fresh air system and you guys are wearing EKGs and shit. And even if you don't need them, just because it makes it look serious and scary. Like, a lot of it's just Hollywood, right? It would look intense and it would look over the top. And if the 4 or 5 people standing around your car were all wearing like some sort of makeshift helmet, and a lightweight fire suit, I don't know that it's all bad. I really don't. I mean, I think it could be.
I hope it's not a makeshift helmet.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, not a makeshift. You know what I mean?
We'll have to get. Tommy Cunningham from Stroud thinks it's an interesting idea, like we said. So it's maybe a new market for these guys, but yeah, it's the problem with it is, where do you start? Where do you begin, and where do you start with it, and how far does it go? But it is interesting to see.
Pro classes.
Yeah, it's we said, Erica, at the start of this, that honestly, being in the car may be the safest place on the starting line because it's that dangerous, and in the pits. And so it just kind of raises your awareness to that type of thing when something happens like what happened with Robert's crew guy over the weekend.
Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, but maybe it saved his life. And I would surely love to see our sport be a little bit more proactive and a little less reactive. So anyways, thanks for your opinion on that, Erica. I didn't know you were still here, so I'm glad we got to hear from you.
Well, cool. Thank you again. I appreciate you guys very much.
Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Erica. Take
Have
care.
a good one.
That's an interesting thing, and I think it's a fun thing to talk about. You got to have these conversations, right?
You're all about it today.
No, I just think it's interesting. And
I mean,
next
Wednesday
do you get to talk about
next Wednesday? You'll
yeah,
be
you
fire
really
suit and helmet to do the show.
Yeah, we're gonna make you wear a fire suit and helmet to the show. You really galvanized our comments here. There's people saying that you've crossed the line. Shut up, Wes. These are some of the comments.
We can't even get people to wear safety equipment like in the race car.
I'm just saying that I think it's an interesting conversation. And like, here's the part of it. How many times do you have the opportunity to like make a difference? So many of these rules have already happened, and they only happen after something really, really, really bad happens. And I think having these conversations is valuable. Even if nothing comes from this, I'm completely fine with that. I really am. But I do think it's something that we should all be thinking about.
For sure.
It's a dangerous place down there. It's like,
but I think it starts with, like Erica said, if you've never been to a drag race, if you're not familiar with this sport, don't go up there. I see women in flip-flops carrying babies up there. And I mean, like, that makes me cringe because there's so much that could go wrong with that. No, if you're on the crew, you're wearing pants, shoes, and, aware of what you're getting yourself into, I'm all for it. But, you've got to, I think it's a little bit, it starts with regulating who's up there. And I think we're going to see more of that to begin with. But shout out to Erica. Part of what makes her the GOAT is the fact that she worked so hard just to make it here to the show. I mean, there's a lot of people, and I just wanted to say that there's a lot, we harp on it and we talk about people tooting their own horn or being available to the media. This is arguably the greatest pro stock driver of all time, multi-time world champion, just won this last weekend's race, coming back from a sponsor event on the East Coast through ice, traveling back to the Midwest.
Plane gets diverted.
Nothing was going to stop her from coming on this show. So, I mean, that's a testament to how it's done. That's how it's done. And that's how you get to the point where she is now. So any young people out there that maybe aren't aware of Erica's story, we talked about it, starting with all the struggles for the first 7 years and then breaking through. That's how it's done. That's how you keep it going.
I agree. And one last comment on this: foot brake, flip flop, shorts running an 890 with no cage, and Wes wants folks to wear suits to work on the cars. My main thing, I'm talking about Nitro funny cars.
Yeah,
I'm talking about top fuel dragsters, the highest levels of our sport, and that's where it starts. I mean, that's the tip of the spear. That's why I would want it to happen there, because I don't expect the guy that's racing his near stock, Camaro to be wearing, a fire suit when his buddy pulls him into the water or whatever. But I do think it creates that mindset that we do have to be thinking about these type of things. And I don't know that it would be a bad thing for the crewman on a top fuel car or a funny car or a pro stock or a pro modified car competing at the highest levels of our sport, to be held to a different standard.
When you go get your pro stock license, me and T are going to be in SFI 20 gear. I'll pull you in the beams. I'm going to have my gear. I'll have a fresh air SFI 20. I'll be ready.
Tommy Cunningham gets it, an F1 appearance of sorts. Man, a lot of times looking the part. I mean, how many times do you hear people say, dress the part?
Yeah.
Right? You want to be taken seriously on the starting line? Who are the people that never get screwed with on the starting line? Let's do this real quick. The people wearing fire suits never get thrown off the starting line.
Yeah,
never get messed with because it's painfully obvious.
I'm bringing a suit with me to the next race so that nobody will kick me off the starting line.
Because the people that are there know that these people are serious and they're taking whatever they're doing very seriously. They're wearing a fire suit, right? Matter of fact, I have known people to use it as a hack. Instead of wearing a black Pro Line hoodie, they throw on their Jegs fire suit jacket. It's getting a little chilly, and they know if they're wearing a fire suit, they look like a racer, and they're probably going to be able to walk wherever they want down on the starting line. And I don't know that I'm crazy to think that the crewmen and women that, not everybody, the 4 or 5 people that are directly related to a pro level drag racing team, I don't think I'm crazy to think that they should be in some safety gear. So enough ranting about that, but I do think it's very interesting.
Drag racing originates from outlaw badassery. And NASCAR, if someone said all NASCAR crews wear these safety gear, when we talked about that, but the best days of NASCAR were when those dudes were drinking a Bud and put out the cigarette, then jump over the wall and in their like bell bottoms and work on the,
that's true,
zip
right?
the tires off or whatever. So, I'm just saying.
No, 100%.
Did have a question here. What's the reaction of the drag racing world to the Street Outlaw? Ryan Martin winning the Racer of the Year and the blowback. Did we get any blowback? And we really didn't get that much. I think that everybody respects what he did.
I tell you, for me, it's an aspirational culture thing. First and foremost, if the Racer of the Year award just goes to he or she that wins the most races, it's not going to be very interesting for very long. Right? It's going to be whoever wins the most races in our sport's highest class. And we felt that we were very proud of all our nominees. I'll speak on behalf of everybody here at Drag Illustrated. I think a case could be made for Matt Smith, no doubt. The season that he had, the adversity that he fought against, his hands-on approach to racing, the fact that he races with his wife. I mean, he's a second-generation racer. His dad's a legend. There's a lot of things. Greg Anderson, an argument definitely could have been made for him, right? Scored his 100th Pro Stock win in 2022, had the best car all year long. But to the conversation we were having earlier, he had to squeak it out there at the end, to win the NHRA World Championship. Steve Torrance, I think he was probably the odds-on favorite to win it. No doubt about it. But we also recognize that there have been magazines and media outlets in existence to celebrate the achievements and accomplishments of drag racing's highest levels for years and decades. Drag Illustrated was built on the back of grassroots, outlaw door slammer drag racers that by and large were ignored by other media outlets, that by and large didn't get coverage elsewhere, that weren't on ESPN2 or weren't on Fox Sports. So this year, when we looked at our nominees and saw that we had someone who was racing a door car at 8 Mile tracks, outlaw tracks, diving in to his role as an ambassador, leaning into his role as a celebrity in our sport, doing the appearances, signing the autographs, and competing at a really high level, winning back-to-back championships, we felt it was a fairly obvious choice. This is a guy whose story is still pretty relatable. He drives the tow rig. He's putting a motor in the car, with one or two of his buddies, right, overnight before the next round. The schedule that existed for No Prep Kings the last year, I believe, was as grueling, if not more so, than any other drag racing schedule in existence. And the fact that Ryan Martin went out there and did it in a door car, did it racing at tracks where the performances weren't even shown on the scoreboard. What Ryan Martin did in 2022, in our opinion, was particularly unique and particularly representative of what we want our Racer of the Year award to represent and who we want it to serve. It's not about winning the most races. It's not about sweeping the Western swing. It's the NHRA's job to celebrate those happenings. And we want to be a part of that, and we certainly appreciate it, and we will certainly fan that flame and do our part to shine a light on those moments. But for us, there was an opportunity here to really plant our flag amidst the grassroots outlaw weekend warriors that make the sport of drag racing great. We love having conversations with Robert Hight. We love having conversations with Erica Enders, but it's not lost on me that our sport is built on the back of people like Don Meziere, right? On the back of John and Laura Sears, people that are working during the week and racing on the weekends, right? I mean, that's the heart and soul of our sport. The people that aren't getting parts for free, that aren't getting a big discount or a deep discount, that are having to pay Summit or Jegs prices or Motor State prices for the stuff that they use to go racing. And I really felt strongly that we needed to make sure that when we casted our vote, and we put someone on the cover of this magazine that we felt was the Racer of the Year, we wanted it to be someone that the masses can relate to, right? And that's not to say that, an NHRA Top Fuel champion won't be the Racer of the Year next year, or a Pro Stock racer won't be the Racer of the Year next year. Maybe they will. But we truly believed in our argument. We were strongly convicted in the fact that Ryan Martin represented the kind of guy, the kind of person that we wanted to celebrate and that we feel is the tip of the sword for the sport of drag racing across the board. So there really wasn't a ton of pushback, man. We actually had a lot more appreciation posts and appreciative comments than anything else. I have to say that by all accounts, the DI Awards were a huge success. And I think we're only getting started. I mean, that was something that, I don't want to say threw together. We worked really hard on, but I'm doing it with one arm. We've got a limited team that put that event together, and the way it all worked out and the response that we've had, we couldn't be more proud of it. And I remember sitting down at dinner, the last food I had before I went in for surgery last Thursday, and I got a text from Ryan Martin saying, "I hope you know how much I appreciate this more than you know." And Mike Carpenter mentioned this about Erica a few minutes ago. There have been plenty of pro level racers that we've reached out to get to come on this show, and they don't make time for it. They don't have time for it because they got bigger fish to fry, right? They don't have time for an interview or what have you. The fact that Ryan made so much time for us, I really appreciate it. Not that that's the difference maker, but I really believe Ryan is exactly the type of guy. He's a family man. He's a father. He's a small business owner, and he's one hell of a drag racer. And he was a perfect fit for the inaugural Drag Illustrated Racer of the Year award. And he set the bar really high, man, for whomever comes next. I'm already thinking about people. Discussions are already being had. But I think the bar has been set really high, and I'm genuinely proud of it, man. And I'm glad you guys watched. We appreciate it very, very much.
We're going to have to call Alicia, and you're going to have to go to the house a little bit. You came loaded. You came loaded to talk today.
I haven't left the house in 5 or 6 days, big dog. Yeah, I've hardly left. Yeah, I'm in a tremendous amount of pain though, so I'll shut up. Yeah. No, they gave me oxycodone or oxycontin or something.
Oh,
these pills.
Both.
Yeah. They gave me Oxycontin, and these things knock me out. I ain't built for pain pills, bro. But it makes a difference, dude. They cut my arm it's way worse than I thought it was going to be. I didn't think it'd be that big of a deal, but it's been a big deal. But
yeah. Feeling
anyways,
better, right?
Man. Yeah,
Feel
man.
better?
Thanks for asking. I feel a little bit. Today's the closest to normal. Today's probably the closest to normal I felt last night. I slept a little bit finally. I've been really having struggle sleeping. I don't sleep on my back well, and they want me to like sleep with my arm up. It's a pain in the whatever. But yeah, it's all good, man.
The only thing
you guys
I
got
would
anything
have
else you want to cover?
when they were in there, I would have had them do bicep implants. That's for me.
I asked.
For me,
I
need
sure
that.
you did.
I mean, I need that. So that's if I was under the knife in the bicep area, that's what I'm getting.
Well, here's what I told him. I said, hey, historically, my left arm, my left bicep's been a little bigger than my right one. So if you could do a little, they say beauty's all about symmetry.
Yeah.
Right. So I said, if you could get this one, like get a good look at both of them. And I just want them to match, and they told me to shut up and breathe deep. And then the next thing I know, I woke up in a recovery room.
Yeah.
So,
and you're talking about, you're talking crazy stuff.
You know what Alicia told me I said whenever I woke up?
Yeah.
She said, I opened my eyes and asked where we qualified and who went low. She
also said that you said you're never getting in that golden river again. It's too dangerous. So you're having flashbacks to our adventures in Denver.
I did, man. Right. Isn't that funny? She goes, you lifted your head up and you go, where'd we qualify? Who went low? And I'm like, man, I'm ate up with this shit. I need medication.
That stuff will mess you up, man.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. Yeah. So, well, hey, everybody, seriously, thank you for joining us. As always, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to talk drag racing with all of y'all, especially my buddies, Mike Carpenter and JT Hudson. Thank you guys so much. Another public shout out for all your help last week during the DI Awards. Also, Dion Walrath, our whole team at Drag Illustrated, Caroline, Nancy, Josh, Nate, everybody really jumped at that deal and made a big difference. So thank you all so much. And I guess we will see you all next Wednesday for another wonderful episode of the Wes Buck Show. Thank you guys so much. I'll talk to you soon.
See you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.